Audiobook RNA Vaccines, A Step Toward Transhumanism. By Milco Baute. Written and published in 2020. Author's notes. The goal of the pandemic is mass vaccination. The real pandemic is yet to begin. The truth always comes to light, even if the crime remains unpunished. Lies have become so common that ordinary people find it very hard to believe the truth. Following the crowd has never been a wise decision. Whoever does not denounce abuse is passively guilty. Today, what is evil is called good and what is good is called evil, lies are considered truth and truth is called conspiracy theory. And everything said to be politically correct always ends up being biblically incorrect. To be politically passive is to be ideologically complicit. To be apolitical or neutral is to be a participant in evil or indifferent to good, in which one could contribute with ideas and position. Usually, these kinds of people later complain about the evil they could have prevented with their vote or their voice. When the press is silent, the press kills. Every accomplice to a crime is part of it. Ignorance is more than the lack of knowledge. An ignorant person is also one who rejects the truth and prefers lies out of convenience or stupidity, someone who lives in his own lie and has a false personality. The worst part is that in this world, the ignorant are the majority. If God is in control of the universe and all creation, why should I worry or be afraid? God created us with free will, something that no government, religion, or ideology can take away or impose as a way of thinking. Apparently, and as a joke, according to the new normality of wearing masks, the vaccinated become happy sick people and the unvaccinated remain healthy slaves. When truth is mixed with lies, it is no longer truth, it is still a lie. When science is mixed with interest, it is no longer science, it is convenience. When journalism follows only one script, it is no longer journalism, it is manipulation. When art is mixed with politics, it is no longer art, it is activism. When good is mixed with evil, that is not of God, it is of Satan. When God is mixed with sin and bad intentions, that is blasphemy. Sheep also suffer from anxiety, panic, and group stress when they sense a threat, which can make them sick and affect the quality of their meat and wool. Does this sound familiar? The vaccine against the pandemic that afflicts us is not the chip of total control, it is the excuse for it, a patent that already exists under ID 2020. Agenda 2030 is applied communism. Pure utopia designed to manipulate the masses and convince them to be controlled by a world government, for the good of all. Milco Baute, author. Preface. As a researcher and communicator, I take on the task of informing about this matter of vaccines, without the intention of speculating, being absolutist, paranoid, or anti-vaccine. I am not an expert, I hold no doctorate, nor am I a scientist or doctor, but by analyzing the times, events, testimonies, history, and confronting all of it, spiritually, with biblical prophecies and the teachings of God's Word, by gathering data, articles, and information from various opinions, I bring forth this topic of vaccines in depth, since it worries so many people. In this book, I will present my analysis and opinion, based on what I know, read, research, and what God reveals to me through His Spirit. You will learn the history surrounding everything related to viruses, pandemics, vaccination, media manipulation, and globalization. The issue is not only about the so-called fast vaccines or RNA vaccines, but about the entire health crisis that began in 2020, which was actually planned long before. An informed person is a prepared person. Tyrants and globalists benefit from keeping us as uninformed as possible, keeping us at a low profile and in a collective mediocrity, thus making us more controllable and easily manipulated to submit to their will. I have never been satisfied with a single opinion. I always inquire, analyze, and try to seek a second opinion from professional experts in the field of science and health. I trust more in the opinions of scientists and doctors with vocation, ethics, morality, integrity, and a true love of research, than in those of the professionals of official media who, without scientific, medical, or logical foundation, claim things that they themselves later contradict. The fool believes and asserts everything, but the wise doubt and reflect. Aristotle. Some advice from God's Word for these times of pandemic and tyranny. Pray without ceasing, 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 17. Do not fear bad news, Psalm 112 verse 7. Let us not sleep as others do, wake up, but let us watch and be sober. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 6. Vengeance belongs to God, Romans 12 verse 19. Be still and wait on God, for God is with us, Psalm 46 verses 10 to 11. My opinion. Viruses are very dangerous microorganisms that can cause death, especially in people who are mentally and physically weak. No one knows their true health condition unless they are checked with medical exams regularly. Our daily rush, anxiety, and stress make us neglect that possibility. Even people with medical insurance often do not visit their doctor because they feel no symptoms, but when symptoms appear, it may already be too late. I do not deny the existence of the coronavirus SARS-CoV-2 that causes the infection or disease known as COVID-19, nor its danger, which has taken millions of lives in less than 2 years. Nor do I deny that there is a pandemic. However, in my opinion, based on my analysis of both official and independent reports from scientists and researchers with ethics and morals, this pandemic is a planned event being manipulated unscrupulously for dubious purposes. Dubious to many, but very clear to me, when viewed in the light of the times we live in and the biblical prophecies and warnings in God's Word. When I analyze something, I first do so spiritually, consulting or recalling the Holy Scriptures, which are my guide and manual for living according to the will of the Creator. God gives grace, knowledge, and wisdom to mankind so that we can live, be useful to society, form families if we wish, help and guide others both in divine direction and in the progress of civilization. I believe the virus was created intentionally to provoke a pandemic, because scientists admit that viruses are created in laboratories for the purpose of studying and combating them. But there is a popular saying among businessmen, who have now turned into philanthropists, that says, the best way to succeed is to create a problem and then sell the solution. Science and technology do not always advance in favor of humanity, but rather to enslave it and profit from it. Man is sinful and perverse by nature, some are aware of it, while others don't even realize it because they are slaves to their own sin. A human being without God is an easy prey for the enemy of souls, who will give him power and use him to deceive, mislead, or even destroy others. Generally, viruses and their strains or variants are patented. How can that be controlled when there are so many psychopaths in power and high positions? It is difficult to comprehend. Who has the power and the perverse idea of using it for evil purposes, like reducing the world population or profiting from it? Even harder to understand and accept. But such people exist, and covertly or openly, they have shamelessly let us know. There are people with so much power, money, and influence that their goal is not to earn more or perpetuate their economic empires, because they already have all they could want. They have enough money to send spacecraft to other planets, create conditions for life, colonize them, and seek to own not only our planet but others as well. Yet first, they invest in Earth, buying our institutions to dominate the world. These are wicked beings whose intent is not only to own institutions, resources, and limitless property, but also our souls. 1 Peter 5 verse 8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. 2 Corinthians 2 verse 11. Lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. In the past, psychopaths were low-profile individuals, but today they are politicians, rulers, philanthropists, investors, scientists, doctors, lawyers, journalists, reporters, presenters, actors, directors, producers, and even priests. Although not all of them, the number is growing, and many hide behind their professions or positions. They did not create a vaccine to save us from the pandemic, they created the pandemic to vaccinate us, and the effects will be seen sooner or later. Those who get vaccinated are not protected from any virus, and even if they were, they are forcing their bodies to create unnecessary defenses if not exposed to those viruses, as in the case of healthcare workers. that could alter or damage the immune system and lead to chronic illness. Moreover, not everyone responds the same way to vaccines or medications, which means there is an additional risk to both health and life. The real intention behind the pandemic is to forcibly turn the entire world population into patients and to make us take vaccines, filling the pockets of unscrupulous individuals disguised as kind philanthropists and scientists, working for a noble cause. God created your immune system, and the globalists who want to play gods on earth want to modify it, turning you into a lifelong patient, which means a customer that provides them with a residual income. Many children of God do not understand that fear of sickness is not from God, 1 John 4 verse 18, and that trusting more in science made by immoral men with dubious intentions is a sin, Jeremiah 17 verse 5. Our body is the temple of the Spirit of God, 1 Corinthians 6 verse 19, and we must not alter it or change how God made it for any human reason. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, Hebrews 11 verse 6, and he will not hold the guilty unpunished, Numbers 14:18. God tests our faith while we live on earth, 1 Peter 1 verses 6-7. Everything we have done for God, Ephesians 2 verses 8-9, is in vain if we allow ourselves to be intimidated by a virus and obey men before obeying God, Psalm 112 verse 7. A study shows that the virus was designed as a gateway to other variants. Such a virus does not exist naturally. They are determined to reduce the population, it makes no difference to them whether by the virus or the vaccine. The only thing they have surely inoculated us with is fear. The truth is that in several countries, the virus has reactivated and mocked science while continuing to spread. What we can expect soon, if this plague continues expanding, is for it to be acknowledged that we are all at risk of infection, and exposed to new vaccines whose nature only God knows. I don't think they are immediately lethal, but they could become so late, because the devastating success of the virus is encouraging for the designers of new world orders. The worst disease that this virus causes in millions of people is fear, undoubtedly, but the most monstrous one is the morbid submission to the state that administers it, often regardless of the consequences. I cannot reproduce everything being said, but fear makes us vulnerable, it takes away our freedom, when we should be demanding that governments clarify the facts and hold China accountable. The Chinese Communist Party is the only culprit and beneficiary, sending a clear message that they can do whatever they want, and nothing happens, because vested interests and money are cowardly and vile. In the clinical trial conducted to test the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, half of the participants received a placebo instead of the vaccine or generic treatment. Since this so-called vaccine was developed very quickly and has not been sufficiently tested on all types of people, healthy or sick, these clinical trials were extended. However, because of the urgency, they have been expanded to the general population. Remember that vaccine manufacturers cannot be sued. From what I deduce and conclude, if some completely healthy people experience side effects or magnetization in parts of their body, it is because they received the vaccine. Those who feel nothing or only mild discomfort likely received the placebo. If you received the vaccine and felt nothing, it may be that you only got the placebo, so consider yourself blessed. In my opinion, God gave you another chance. Why is magnetism in some points of the upper body? For the past 20 years, nanorobot technology has been developed for health purposes, so I believe that large-scale human experimentation is underway. Big tech companies are using it, and billionaire Elon Musk is not the pioneer of this technology, he's only conducting animal trials. This technology serves not only for controlling terminal diseases or disabilities but also for controlling human consciousness. And do you know who finances Pfizer and Moderna? The same person who funds and directs WHO protocols, Bill Gates, a monopolist who has long been playing God, worried about overpopulation, connected to the pharmaceutical industry, and allied with other philanthropists, the Chinese Communist Party, the UN, and other political and economic powers. Perhaps I am speculating or exaggerating, and I truly hope I am wrong, but there are many suspicious and intriguing things happening around this vaccine, testimonies, evidence, statements, and an obsession with controlling the population, health, food, environment, and information, as well as a strong push to establish the Great Reset. On the other hand, ethical scientists and doctors are being censored, politicians who oppose these tyrannical protocols and human rights organizations are being silenced, while propaganda urging everyone to get vaccinated continues, without a real scientific foundation against a virus that is already under control. Why are governments suddenly so concerned about protecting us from a virus with such low mortality? Could it be that they're simply following orders to vaccinate their left and right people without question or research? Basically, they're obeying their superiors, who, without a doubt, are the pharmaceutical laboratories and global elites, the 1% that controls the rest of us. Before making any uncertain decision, especially about health, remember, the more something is advertised, the less effective it usually is, because more money is spent on promotion than on quality. If the media, controlled by politicians and unscrupulous corporations, heavily promotes an experimental vaccine, too new to prove whether it's safe or effective for everyone, then it's not good, neither in the short nor long term. Remember that the true goal behind all this is to turn us all into lifetime patients, so that the creators and investors can earn residual income from you until you die, among other suspicious intentions. Every virus can be controlled, even if man-made. God is good and wise. He made our bodies capable of defending themselves, we just need to take greater precautions, wash our hands often, avoid touching our face, avoid unnecessary contact, drink plenty of water, exercise, and not fear evil, because fear causes stress, and stress opens the door to disease. But above all, do not watch the news. It is designed and manipulated to create more stress, panic, and convince us of the garbage they sell, pure propaganda without science or evidence. The truth is inversely proportional to what official media reports, because they serve industry interests and the masters of the world. So, if they say something is good, it's because it's not. That is why truth is censored, and those who carry it are sometimes even threatened. Propaganda only sells an image or product that doesn't work, is of poor quality, or is toxic, and the more it's advertised, the less it's worth. The mass media have turned into promoters of products, treatments, ideologies, and movements that are rotten to the core. Don't be deceived. Understand this once and for all, healthy people do not need vaccines against a virus that can be controlled with natural remedies. Not everyone must be vaccinated, and whenever something is made mandatory, it's because it's not good. Scientists have never agreed with each other, but the official scientists, recruited by the globalist elite, not only disagree with others, but they also contradict themselves, as long as they can impose their agenda for world control. I do not criticize anyone who decides to get vaccinated, whether they believe in God or not, or practice any religion, but do not say, as some do, that it's necessary to obey the laws of the land to please or serve God. Do not make me feel guilty, sinful, or irresponsible for refusing vaccination, nor drag me into ignorance, because, so far, in the United States it's not mandatory, and even if it were, I still wouldn't take it, because I trust the immune system my God designed for me. In reality, what they call a vaccine is not a vaccine, but a treatment to create antibodies artificially or forcibly. I am not against vaccines, I am against forcing people to get them or punishing those who defend their free will not to submit to human laws or experiments. Remember, in the coming global tyranny, which the Bible describes as the reign of the Antichrist, it will also be law to receive a mark or code on the hand or forehead to buy, sell, receive payment, or live in society, but that will be a direct pass to hell. The Bible clearly says in Acts 5 verse 29, we must obey God rather than men. Since many have rejected the vaccine and there is evidence of adverse reactions and deaths caused by it, now the same industry that wants to make us lifetime patients has invented a drug called colchicine, and even antidepressants, proving that fear itself spreads the virus. It's pure marketing strategy, create a problem, offer the solution, sell it, and get rich. On the other hand, the Chinese Communist Party has already made a vaccine that controls the effects of the COVID-19 vaccine, proving once again, create a problem, find the solution, and you'll become rich. If not, then they're just continuing to experiment with our health, injecting more chemicals and drugs under the guise of public safety. It comforts me to know that the unvaccinated still outnumber the vaccinated. We remain the majority, and they won't be able to subdue or get rid of us. That's why, in the United States, the demons of the Democratic Party and the devils of the globalist elite are so hysterical and desperate to vaccinate us all. Viruses have always existed. Viruses, germs, and bacteria have always existed, even before human beings. God is wise and loves us. He is not a cruel tyrant who punishes or imposes, for if that were the case, he would not have created us with free will. Yet, although God is love, he is also a just judge who watches over his creation through spiritual, physical, and natural laws, which, if violated, bring consequences. God also tests our faithfulness in order to bring order to our lives and help us mature spiritually, for we are eternal spiritual beings. The physical dimension in which we currently move is only a temporary stage to choose our spiritual eternity. The body is merely a vehicle to move through the earth and multiply. He is our creator and therefore has always been in control of what is visible, invisible, natural, and spiritual. God controls viruses, whether they arise naturally or are created by man for destruction or personal gain. Here, I present a list of existing viruses that have taken many lives. Some of them are even more dangerous and have killed more people than the coronavirus, which has been given more attention and publicity because it spread rapidly before effective means of control were known. Moreover, it is a manipulated pandemic intended to turn the world's population into permanent patients, whether sick or carriers. We have rightly named it a pandemic, as it is a well-planned and calculated scheme to establish total and tyrannical control under the New World Order, announced by its promoters and creators, politicians, unscrupulous scientists, philosophers, and influential figures in the global economic elite who control world economies, international organizations, and governments, forcing us to accept their laws, methods, and solutions, under the pretext of health control. List of viruses. Arenavirus. LCM Lassa virus complex, Old World arenaviruses. COVID-19 equals coronavirus. Lymphocytic choriomeningitis virus, neurotropic strains. Lymphocytic choriomeningitis virus, other strains. MAPIA virus. Other LCM Lassa viral complexes. Tachyribe viral complexes, New World arenaviruses. Guanarito virus. Hunin virus. Sabia virus. Machupo virus. Flexel virus. Other tachyribe viral complexes. Bunyaviridae. Banja virus. Belgrade virus, also known as Dubrava. Bunyamura virus. Oropouche virus. California encephalitis virus. Germiston virus. Sin Nombre virus, formerly Muerto Canyon. Hantavirus. Hantan, Korean hemorrhagic fever. Seoul virus. Pumala virus. Prospect Hill virus. Other hantaviruses. Norovirus. Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever virus. Hazara virus. Phlebivirus. Rift Valley fever virus. Sandfly fever virus. Toscana virus. Other bunyaviruses. Calasaviridae. Vesivirus, swine vesicular exanthema virus. Legovirus, rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus. Norovirus, Norwalk virus. Sapovirus, Sapporo virus. Coronaviridae. SARS virus, severe acute respiratory syndrome. Filoviridae. Ebola virus. Marburg virus. Flaviviridae. Australian encephalitis, Murray Valley encephalitis. Hepatitis G. Central European tick-borne encephalitis virus. Apsetarov. Hanzalova. HYPR. Cumling. Dengue virus types 1 to 4. Hepatitis C. Virus, HCV. Japanese encephalitis. Chiassonar forest disease. Looping ill. Omsk virus. Powassan. Rocio. Russian spring-summer encephalitis. St. Louis encephalitis. Wesselsbrunn virus. West Nile virus. Yellow fever. Other flaviviruses. Hepatnaviridae. Hepatitis B virus. Hepatitis D, Delta, virus. Herpes viridae. Cytomegalovirus. Epstein-Barr virus. Herpes virus simiae, B virus. Herpes simplex virus types 1 and 2. Varicella zoster virus. Human herpes virus 7. Human herpes virus 8, HHV8. Human lymphotropic virus B, HBLV HHV6. Orthomyxoviridae. Influenza virus types A, B, and C. Tick-borne orthomyxoviruses, Dori and thogotoviruses. Papoviviridae. BK and JC viruses. Human papillomavirus. Paramyxoviridae. Measles virus. Mumps virus. Newcastle disease virus. Parainfluenza virus types 1 to 4. Respiratory syncytial virus. Parvoviridae. Human parvovirus, B19. Picornaviridae. Acute hemorrhagic conjunctivitis virus, AHC. Coxsackie virus. Echo virus. Hepatitis A virus, human enterovirus type 72. Poliovirus. Rhinovirus. Poxviridae. Buffalo pox virus. Chola virus. Cowpox virus. Elephant pox virus. Milker's nodule virus. Molluscum contagiosum virus. Monkeypox virus. Orf virus. Rabbit pox virus. Vaccinia virus. Variola, major and minor, virus. Whitepox virus, variola virus. Yatapox virus, Tana and Yaba. Rioviridae. Coltavirus. Human rotavirus. Orbovirus. Riovirus. Retroviridae, retroviruses. Human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, cause of AIDS. Human T-cell leukemia viruses, HTLV, types 1 and 2. Simian immunodeficiency virus, SIV. Rhabdoviridae. Rabies virus. Vesicular stomatitis virus. Togaviridae, alphavirus. Eastern equine encephalomyelitis. Biberu virus. Chikungunya virus. Everglades virus. Myaro virus. Mucambo virus. Ndomu virus. Unyongyong virus. Ross River virus. Semliki forest virus. Sinbise virus. Tunate virus. Venezuelan equine encephalomyelitis. Western equine encephalomyelitis. Other known alphaviruses. Robavirus, rubella. Toroviridae. Unclassified. Viruses. Equine morbillivirus. Still unidentified hepatitis viruses. Source, wikipedia.org. What is a vaccine? A vaccine is a portion of a virus that is injected so that the individual's immune system can identify it and prepare to fight it when the real virus enters the body. Types of vaccines. There are many different types of vaccines. Each is designed to teach your immune system how to fight certain types of germs and the serious diseases they cause. When scientists create vaccines, they consider how the immune system responds to the germ. Who needs to be vaccinated against that germ? The best technology or approach to create the vaccine. Depending on these factors, scientists decide what type of vaccine to develop. There are 4 main types of vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines. Inactivated vaccines. Subunit, recombinant, polysaccharide, and conjugate vaccines. Toxoid vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines. Live vaccines use a weakened, or attenuated, form of the germ that causes a disease. Because these vaccines are so similar to the natural infection they prevent, they create a strong and long-lasting immune response. Usually, 1 or 2 doses of most live vaccines can protect you for life against that germ and the disease it causes. However, live vaccines also have some limitations. For example, since they contain a small amount of weakened live viruses, some people should consult their healthcare provider before receiving them, such as those with weakened immune systems, long-term health problems, or who have undergone organ transplants. They must be kept cold, which means they can't easily be used in countries with limited refrigeration. Live vaccines are used to protect against measles, mumps, rubella, combined MMR vaccine, rotavirus, smallpox, chickenpox, yellow fever. Inactivated vaccines. Inactivated vaccines use the dead version of the germ that causes a disease. These vaccines usually don't provide as strong or long-lasting immunity as live vaccines. You may need several doses over time, booster shots, to maintain protection against the disease. Inactivated vaccines are used to protect against hepatitis A, influenza, injectable only, polio, injectable only, rabies, subunit, recombinant, polysaccharide, and conjugate vaccines. These vaccines use specific parts of the germ, such as its protein, sugar, or capsule, the shell surrounding the germ. Because the vaccine only uses key parts of the germ, it produces a strong immune response that targets essential components. These vaccines can also be used for almost anyone who needs them, including people with weakened immune systems or chronic health conditions. The only limitation is that booster shots may be required for continued protection. These vaccines protect against HIV disease, Haemophilus influenza type B, hepatitis B, HPV, human papillomavirus, whooping cough, as part of the combined DTaP vaccine, pneumococcal disease, shingles, toxoid vaccines. Toxoid vaccines use a toxin, harmful product, made from the germ that causes a disease. They create immunity to the parts of the germ that cause illness, rather than to the germ itself. This means the immune response targets the toxin instead of the entire germ. Like other vaccines, booster doses may be needed to maintain protection. Toxoid vaccines are used to protect against diphtheria, tetanus. What does the World Health Organization, WHO, say? Why are so many vaccines being developed? Ordinarily, many experimental vaccines are analyzed before any are deemed safe and effective. For example, approximately 7 out of every 100 vaccines tested in laboratories and on animals are deemed suitable for human clinical trials. Of those that reach clinical trials, only 1 in 5 proves to be useful. Developing a large number of different vaccines increases the chances that one or more will be effective and safe for the demographic groups prioritized for protection. Main methods for making a vaccine. There are 3 main methods used to design a vaccine. These methods differ based on whether they use whole viruses or bacteria, only fragments of the pathogen that trigger the immune response, or only the genetic material that contains the instructions for making specific proteins, without the entire virus. 1. Method using the whole pathogen. Inactivated vaccines. The first approach isolates the virus or bacteria and inactivates or destroys it with chemicals, heat, or radiation. This technique has long been used for human vaccines, for example, flu and polio vaccines. It allows production at an acceptable scale, though it requires special laboratories and longer manufacturing times. Typically, 2 or 3 doses are needed. Attenuated vaccines. This method uses live viruses that are active but weakened. The MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, and shingles vaccines are examples. These vaccines can be mass-produced, but they are not always suitable for immunocompromised individuals. Viral vector-based RNA-based vaccines. This type uses a harmless virus as a carrier for fragments, proteins, of the target pathogen to trigger an immune response without causing the disease. For example, the Ebola vaccine uses this technology. It allows rapid development. 2. Method using antigenic subunits. Antigenic subunit vaccines use only specific fragments, antigenic subunits, of a virus or bacterium that the immune system needs to recognize. These do not contain the entire pathogen or a carrier virus. They are often made of proteins or carbohydrates. Most vaccines in children's immunization schedules are subunit vaccines, including those against pertussis, tetanus, diphtheria, and meningococcal meningitis. 3. The genetic method, nucleic acid vaccines. Unlike traditional vaccines that use weakened or inactivated pathogens, nucleic acid vaccines use genetic sequences that provide instructions for cells to produce specific proteins, but not the whole pathogen. DNA and RNA molecules are the instructions our cells use to make proteins. In our bodies, DNA is transcribed into messenger RNA, mRNA, which is then used as a template to create specific proteins. These vaccines insert specific sets of instructions, either DNA or mRNA, into our cells so that they produce the exact protein the immune system must recognize and respond to. This nucleic acid method is a new technology. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, no vaccine of this type had completed the full approval process for human use, although some DNA-based vaccines, for certain cancers, were in human trials. Because of the pandemic, research accelerated rapidly, and some mRNA vaccines for COVID-19 received emergency use authorization, meaning they could be given to people outside of clinical trials. My analysis on this matter. COVID-19 vaccines are not really vaccines, that's why they are called RNA vaccines, because they are a generic treatment that forces the body to create antibodies so that the immune system can attack any virus entering the body. That might seem harmless, but altering DNA and artificially or forcibly creating antibodies for the immune system to defend itself is more dangerous than it appears. Remember that God created everything, species, nature, and even viruses, with which we must coexist, but God also created us with a perfect immune system capable of defending us from any foreign attack, whether germs, viruses, parasites, or bacteria. To alter that is to play God, and allowing ourselves to be forced to produce antibodies is tempting God. It's like being dissatisfied with Him or the way He made us. Besides, the long-term effects of this RNA vaccine have not been proven, and not all bodies are the same, so no one truly knows the reactions or harm it may cause, despite all the clinical trials that have been conducted, and they can't really guarantee anything. God's Word shows us what to do to avoid getting sick or infected by the evil in the world. First, we must take care of our health, both physical and mental, watching what we eat, drink, think, listen to, and even what we look at, because for believers, our body is the temple of the Spirit of God, 1 Corinthians 3 verse 17, since if we allow Him, He will not only dwell with us or upon us but also within us, John 14 verse 17. If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person, for God's temple is sacred, and you together are that temple. 1 Corinthians 3 verse 17. God gives wisdom and intelligence to humankind so that we may build, prepare, and help each other. Today, access to information is fast and practically free because from our phones, connected to a network, we can search for and consult experts on how to take better care of our health. Moreover, we have smart TVs or computers connected to the internet, but I really advise no one to believe the news from the official media, which are directed, manipulated, and controlled by unscrupulous people with dubious interests. I am not an expert, doctor, or scientist, just a communicator who likes to research, learn, and inform others. But let me explain how our immune system works. The immune system is like an army in full combat readiness, always alert and prepared. When I served in the Cuban military, my native country, I belonged to an infantry unit, a combat division trained and ready for any surprise attack. When the combat alarm sounded, which happened often as tests, we had to run, put on our shirts if we didn't have them on, grab our weapons, and line up for defense. Well, the immune system works the same way. It detects an intruder, an alien agent, and organizes to defend the body, its home. Our cells and neurons also have awareness. Consciousness is not just part of the brain, though the brain gives the commands and directs the whole organism. If an army is forced to remain armed, formed, alert, and ready all the time without rest, it eventually becomes stressed and fatigued to the point of breaking down. Or becoming sick, only out of fear of an enemy that isn't even there. An army must be prepared, not scared or constantly on alert. Fear works in the subconscious and causes both physical and mental harm. Those who have God should not live or walk in fear, because fear is not from God. It means trusting in the harm the enemy could cause. That state of uncertainty harms any person, army, nation, or territory. Fear attracts nothing good, and those who walk in fear end up receiving what they fear most. What the wicked dread will overtake them, what the righteous desire will be granted. Proverbs 10 verse 24, there is no fear in love. But perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. 1 John 4 verse 18. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7. He, the righteous, will have no fear of bad news, his heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Psalm 112 verse 7. These truths are known by tyrants, dictators, sadists, abusers, criminals, and wicked people who can rise to power and use fear to control the population. If you care for yourself through good diet, hygiene, a healthy lifestyle, positive thinking, faith, and prayer, you have no reason to fear or be surprised by death from a virus, bacteria, or disease. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Philippians 4 verse 8. Why I don't get vaccinated. I am already vaccinated with the Holy Spirit by the grace of God, against fear, panic, and all kinds of malice and influence, spiritually speaking. Since I became an adult, I have not been vaccinated because I believe in God, trusting Him, and in the immune system with which I was created. I never liked the idea of inoculating myself with a virus or a portion of it to train my immune system to fight it before infection. I'm not skeptical of vaccines nor entirely against them, but I don't find them necessary, except during childhood. Vaccines have never been completely safe, statistically proven, and this so-called vaccine is not truly a vaccine, but a generic treatment that modifies DNA to create antibodies that fight and eliminate potential viruses entering the body. This has been claimed and demonstrated by its own creators and sponsors, for a virus that is controlled and can even be treated with remedies. In my opinion, it makes no sense. It is all a massive manipulation to turn us into lifelong patients. Those who sponsor and direct this vaccination campaign, philanthropists, official scientists, mass media outlets, the WHO, World Health Organization, and others, have consistently warned for more than a decade that viruses and pandemics will continue, and that we all must accept and adapt to that new normal. Therefore, don't expect that after 2 doses of a vaccine, you will return to your normal life as before. More viruses and more vaccines will come. Vaccines are a profitable business, and companies cannot be sued for side effects or major consequences. I have learned that when something is imposed, it's because it is not good or doesn't bring anything good. And when truth comes to light, it gets censored. In this decaying world, lies will never be censored. In fact, as often happens, they are promoted. Truth is inversely proportional to the news, metaphorically speaking. When official media, controlled and manipulated by a small group of people with interests but no principles, declare something as true, it's usually false, and vice versa. If you haven't realized that yet, it's because you are blind, and there is no worse blind person than the one who refuses to see. I always research before doing something. It is wise and necessary to seek a second opinion, for, cursed is the one who trusts in man, Jeremiah 17 verse 5. You can't trust anyone, especially those with questionable interests. I don't believe in pseudoscientists or scientists without principles. I am more convinced by ethical scientists with integrity, who speak based on real science, studies, and deep research. Worst of all, we are entrusting our health, body, life, and even our soul to individuals who aren't even scientists, but influential figures with great power, resources, and technology. According to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS, in the United States. www.vaers.gov, the official page that records all vaccine reaction cases, in just 6 months, more than 4,800 deaths were confirmed from COVID-19 vaccines in the U.S. Although they can't or aren't allowed to affirm that those deaths were caused by the vaccine, the fact remains undeniable, because no one knows who will be next. People let themselves be carried away by propaganda, manipulation, emotional blackmail, fear, and intimidation, of losing a job or being rejected, without first analyzing their own physical condition. The most prudent thing is to research and make sure there's no risk, especially when someone has pre-existing health conditions or allergies. We are not all the same, nor do we respond equally to diseases, medications, or vaccines. In my opinion, if out of nearly 8 billion people in the world, just one healthy person dies from a vaccine, don't count me in. I don't want to be a guinea pig or the next to die, even if the probability is less than 0.1%. I don't follow the crowd, especially not the crowd of mediocrity, fear, misinformation, manipulation, and intimidation. I am not a sheep. I would rather die from a virus than from the so-called solution to avoid it. I fear neither viruses nor death. I am in God's hands and depend on Him. If I get sick, He will sustain and heal me. If I die, it is His will. My time has come, and I know I will be in an eternal life far better than this temporary and depressing physical one. Some promises of God I always meditate on and fully trust. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. Psalm 91 verse 10. He, the redeemed, will have no fear of bad news. Psalm 112 verse 7. He forgives all your iniquities, He heals all your diseases. Psalm 103 verse 3. If you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in His sight, give ear to His commandments and keep all His statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I brought on the Egyptians. For I am the Lord who heals you. Exodus 15 verse 26. So, you shall serve the Lord your God, and He will bless your bread and your water. And I will take sickness away from the midst of you. Exodus 23 verse 25. And the Lord will take away from you all sickness, and will afflict you with none of the terrible diseases of Egypt which you have known, but will lay them on all those who hate you. Deuteronomy 7 verse 15. For He bruises, but He binds up, He wounds, but His hands make whole. Job 5 verse 18. But He was pierced for our transgressions, He was crushed for our iniquities, the punishment that brought us peace was upon Him, and by His wounds we are healed. Isaiah 53 verse 5. I don't know if you believe in God, how you believe, or in what God you believe, but one thing is certain, what you think, you attract. And if you walk in fear, it doesn't matter if you get vaccinated, sooner or later, that fear will become a reality. You cannot escape death, but it's far better to trust in God, who gives life, peace, and delivers us from all evil, than to trust in scientific experiments or solutions that cannot offer total safety. Laws and international treaties that protect U.S. against mandatory injections. Helsinki Treaty. Informed consent under the Civil and Commercial Code and Law 26. 529 on patient rights. UNESCO Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. Pact of San Jose, Costa Rica. International Charter of Human Rights. Nuremberg Code. Geneva Declaration. Any violation of these laws is a very serious crime and can be reported for criminal prosecution. You have every right to defend what is yours before criminals, anywhere, anytime. The 8 levels of control that must be achieved before creating a social state. Saul David Alinsky, Chicago, June 30, 1909 to June 12, 1972, Carmel, California, was an American writer and sociologist, considered the founder of community organizing and a mentor to the radical American left. We must always remember that a genuine organization of the people, one in which they fully trust and truly consider their own, must be rooted in the people's own experiences. This is essential if the organization is to be built and founded upon the people. Alinsky, 1969, Reveille for Radicals. Below are the 8 levels of control that must be obtained before one can create a socialist state. Healthcare. Control healthcare, and you control the people. Poverty. Increase the level of poverty as high as possible. Poor people are easier to control and will not fight back if you provide them with everything they need to live. Debt. Increase the debt to an unsustainable level. This allows you to raise taxes, which in turn produces even more poverty. Gun control. Remove the ability to defend themselves from the government. That way, you can create a police state. Welfare. Take control of every aspect of people's lives, food, housing, and income. Education. Take control of what people read and listen to. Control what children learn in school. Religion. Eliminate belief in God from the government and from schools. Class warfare. Divide people into rich and poor. This will cause more discontent and make it easier to take from, or impose upon, the rich with the support of the poor. mRNA vaccines, eugenics, and the drive for transhumanism. By Ryan Matters, published August 28, 2021. The worldwide rollout of the mRNA vaccines is part of a much broader agenda encompassing eugenics and transhumanism. This agenda is funded and promoted by a network of global institutions, politicians, and billionaire technocrats. In 1989, researchers at the Salk Institute in California published a paper detailing how they had developed an RNA transfection system capable of directly introducing RNA into whole tissues and embryos. The concept of using RNA as a drug was described for the first time in that paper, making it the foundational work that laid the groundwork for decades of research to follow. In the paper's discussion section, they stated, "The RNA lipofectin method can be used to introduce RNA directly into whole tissues and embryos." R. W. M. C. Holt, and I. M. V. Unpublished results, raising the possibility that liposome-mediated mRNA transfection may offer another option in the growing technology of eukaryotic gene delivery, an option based on the concept of using RNA as a drug. One of the researchers listed in that paper was Dr. Robert W. Malone, a scientist who has recently been censored on social media for warning about the possible dangers of COVID-19 vaccines. It could be argued that there is no one more qualified to warn about the risks of mRNA injections than the man who helped pioneer the technology, yet big tech companies decided that he was spreading misinformation, because apparently, they know better. Malone's research, which led to a method of efficiently transfecting RNA into human cells using a synthetic cationic lipid, was funded by grants from the American Cancer Society and the National Institutes of Health, NIH, which, notably, now holds financial interest in Moderna's mRNA vaccine, showing its loyalty to this technology, as discussed later. Although Malone's contributions to the development of mRNA technology are well known and well documented, Wikipedia decided to erase all mention of him from its RNA vaccine entry shortly after he began warning the public. The version of the article dated June 14 mentioned Malone by name 3 times and cited his work 6 times. The current version mentions him 0 times. And only cites his work 3 times. This is unsurprising, given Wikipedia's documented bias toward the pharmaceutical industry. More interesting, however, is the institution that produced that research in the first place, the Salk Institute. Named after Jonas Salk, the creator of the Salk polio vaccine, the institute was built in 1962 through funding from the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, today known as the March of Dimes, MOD. The March of Dimes was founded in 1937 with the mission of eradicating polio, during an era when eugenics was already a major, though not yet mainstream, element of the American medical landscape. The theory of eugenics is based on the idea that selective breeding can gradually improve the human race, and that certain families are fit to lead society by virtue of their superior genes. At that time, the main eugenics organizations in the U.S. were the American Eugenics Society, AES, and the American Society of Human Eugenics, ASH, both funded by the Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Harriman families, as well as the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. The Rockefellers, in particular, played a key role in funding and promoting eugenics worldwide. The eugenics movement promoted selective mating, artificial insemination, and forced sterilization and euthanasia as ways to eliminate so-called inferior human beings. The first sterilization law in the United States was passed in 1907 in the state of Indiana. By 1931, many other states had followed suit, enacting similar laws. According to the Indiana Historical Bureau, in 1907, Governor J. Frank Hanley approved the first state eugenics law, mandating sterilization of certain individuals in state custody. Those sterilized under the eugenics laws were considered undesirable because of mental or physical deficiencies such as epilepsy, blindness, or disabilities, as well as for social inadequacies, like drug addiction or criminality. An estimated 60,000 people were sterilized. Under such laws, stripped of their right to have children, and forever branded as mentally deficient. Indeed, the prominence of the American eugenics movement directly inspired the National Socialist Party of Germany, which sterilized over 350,000 people before the end of World War II. After the war, eugenics disappeared from public conversation, but the movement did not vanish. It merely rebranded itself under more acceptable terms like population control and reproductive health, as we will see later. The rise of the March of Dimes as a key player in the American eugenics movement can be traced to its early connections with the Rockefeller Institute, from which it recruited many key members and advisors, such as Professor Anton Julius Carlson, a member of the American Eugenics Society who served on the MAUD's medical and research committees, and Professor Claire E. Turner, another AES member who served as assistant to then-President Basil O'Connor. Just before the creation of the Salk Institute, the March of Dimes announced that it would discontinue its polio programs and redirect its resources toward birth defects. In 1959, the MAUD funded courses in medical genetics at the Jackson Laboratory in Maine, a genetics institute founded in 1929 by Clarence Cook Little, who had served as president of the American Eugenics Society, the American Birth Control League, and the American Euthanasia Society. The stated mission of the Jackson Laboratory is to discover precise genomic solutions for disease and empower the global biomedical community in its shared quest to improve human health. It is noteworthy that the laboratory received major funding in 2020, largely from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, including a $10.6 million grant to find treatments for rare genetic diseases using gene editing technologies. At the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, the lab worked on developing genetically modified mice for use in vaccine studies and other SARS-CoV-2 related research. Beginning in the 1960s, the March of Dimes funded several birth defect prevention centers at medical institutions across the United States. These new centers offered prenatal testing through amniocentesis to determine whether a baby would be born with defects, then gave couples the option to abort the affected child. The March of Dimes also made direct donations to Planned Parenthood, a clear contradiction to its stated mission of fighting for the health of all mothers and babies. Planned Parenthood is a non-profit organization that provides so-called reproductive health care in the U.S. and abroad. Between 2019 and 2020, the organization carried out more than 350,000 abortions, and has been criticized for diverting women's health resources toward abortion services. Logically, a closer look at the group's history reveals that Planned Parenthood's roots are grounded in eugenic ideology. Planned Parenthood was founded by Margaret Sanger, who, far from being the birth control activist that mainstream history portrays, was a racist eugenicist whose goal was to rid the world of the unfit human population. In her essay, A Plan for Peace, she outlines the key goals of her proposed Population Congress, which included A stern and rigid policy of sterilization and segregation to that grade of population whose progeny is tainted, or whose inheritance is such that objectionable traits may be transmitted to offspring. She also mentioned the need to control the intake and output of morons, mental defectives, and epileptics. As noted earlier, these eugenic ideals directly inspired the Nazis, who took many of Sanger's ideas and put them into practice. In his book War Against the Weak, Edwin Black details how the 1933 Nazi sterilization law, as well as later euthanasia laws, were based on the blueprints drawn by Sanger and other American activists. In fact, Sanger's associates were aware of the Nazi euthanasia programs, and even praised them. Returning to the Salk Institute, it's worth noting that the mainstream version of the 20th century polio outbreak, that the disease was caused by a virus and that Dr. Salk's miracle vaccine ended the epidemic, is questionable and very likely false. Paralytic poliomyelitis appeared suddenly in the U.S. in the early 1900s, showing dramatic fluctuations in case numbers, a pattern that continued until the late 1950s. The introduction of the Salk vaccine in 1954 seemed to coincide with a near-instant drop in cases that persisted for more than 2 decades. However, before it was called polio, diseases affecting the limbs were known by other names, such as apoplexy, paresis, and paralysis. Many historical records describe paralysis resulting from exposure to toxic substances, and several of these accounts were documented by Dr. Ralph Scobie in his 1952 testimony before the Select Committee to investigate the use of chemicals in food products, titled The Poison Cause of Poliomyelitis and Obstructions to its Investigation. Scobie's document includes references to multiple studies indicating a link between 20th-century polio outbreaks and consumption of fresh fruit, suggesting an association between polio and toxic pesticide exposure. One of the most widely used pesticides at the time was DDT, a highly toxic organochlorine that had been advertised as good for health, but was eventually banned in 1972. In 1953, Dr. Morton Biskind published a paper in the American Journal of Digestive Diseases stating, McCormick, Scobie, and Goddard, in detailed studies, have pointed out that in the etiology of polio there are undoubtedly factors other than infectious agents, ranging from nutritional deficiencies to a variety of poisons affecting the nervous system. The dangers of toxic pesticides, including DDT, and their devastating environmental effects were later exposed by Rachel Carson in her 1962 book Silent Spring. In more recent years, researchers Dan Olmsted, co-founder of Age of Autism, and Mark Blaxell conducted 2 extensive investigations into the 20th-century polio epidemics, reaching the same conclusion as Scobie and Biskind, that the disease was caused by widespread use of neurotoxic pesticides such as sodium arsenite and DDT. Although Salk's vaccine was hailed as a success, the vaccine itself caused many cases of injury and paralysis. And while the timing of the vaccine's introduction coincides with a reduction in polio cases, as all good scientists know, correlation does not equal causation, especially considering that DDT was phased out, at least in the U.S., during that same period. Interestingly, Dr. Salk's research was funded by Cordelia Scaife May's mother, an heiress of the Mellon banking family, who idolized Margaret Sanger and later joined the board of the International Planned Parenthood Foundation. May's views on immigration were, at the very least, extreme, and some claimed she supported forced sterilization as a way to limit birth rates in developing nations. She later joined the board of the Population Council, an organization founded by John D. Rockefeller III, focused on population reduction. In 1995, the Population Council partnered with the World Health Organization, WHO, to develop fertility-regulating vaccines. It would be a mistake to think that the polio epidemic is unrelated to the current age of vaccination. On the contrary, claiming that polio was eradicated in the U.S. solely through vaccination is a lie that helped gain public favor for childhood vaccination programs and laid the foundation for widespread belief in the safety and effectiveness of all vaccines. Diseases like polio and smallpox, another historical distortion, and the subsequent pro-vaccine propaganda, primed much of the population to blindly accept an experimental injection based on little understood technology. Twisting science. In 1997, 8 years after the Salk Institute's publication, the FDA approved the first clinical trial of transfected RNA designed to develop immunity in cancer patients. The National Institutes of Health's Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee then voted to continue approval a few months later, leading to the first mRNA-based vaccine administered to humans. Although mRNA is now being praised in the media as the next revolution in health, those who can read between the lines may find cause for alarm in statements like this, taken from an article on the history of mRNA by biotech journalist Damien Gard, Stat News. The concept, by making precise tweaks to synthetic mRNA and injecting it into people, any cell in the body could be turned into an on-demand drug factory. Calling human cells on-demand drug factories is precisely the kind of technobabble designed to impress and attract an uninformed public. The mRNA vaccines are based on the following concept: a piece of synthetic mRNA is introduced into the cells, where it serves as a template to create the viral spike protein. Once this protein leaves the cell, the body produces antibodies and learns to fight future infections of SARS-CoV-2. mRNA-based vaccines are often promoted as safer alternatives to DNA-based vaccines, which, according to experts, can cause permanent and dangerous changes to the genetic information of treated individuals. However, can we really be sure that mRNA vaccines do not permanently alter the genetic makeup of our cells? A 2001 paper titled RNA as a Tumor Vaccine, a review of the literature stated, emphasis added. Unlike DNA-based vaccines, there is little danger of RNA sequences integrating into the host genome. The use of the word little clearly suggests that some danger may exist, or, more likely, that researchers simply do not know. In another paper from 2004 by Pascallo, cited earlier, the link between mRNA vaccines and gene therapy is made explicit, something that mainstream outlets continually deny and dismiss. Although they reside in the cytosol and not in the nucleus, mature mRNAs belong to the biochemical family of nucleic acids. mRNA, like DNA, can be considered a gene and, consequently, its use as a vaccine can be considered a form of gene therapy. Interestingly, only through a legal technicality is it permissible to call COVID-19 gene therapies vaccines. This is explained in a document titled The European Regulatory Environment of RNA-Based Vaccines, which states: the definition of a gene therapy medicinal product set out in Annex 1 to Directive 2001/83 EC is as follows. A. It contains an active substance that contains or consists of a recombinant nucleic acid used in or administered to human beings with a view to regulating, repairing, replacing, adding, or deleting a genetic sequence. B. Its therapeutic, prophylactic, or diagnostic effect relates directly to the recombinant nucleic acid sequence it contains or to the product of the genetic expression of that sequence. Gene therapy medicinal products shall not include vaccines against infectious diseases. As can be seen, merely labeling a gene therapy as a vaccine against infectious disease exempts it from being classified as gene therapy. This appears to be a kind of regulatory loophole allowing for the easier approval of mRNA-based genetic therapies intended for human use. The matter of approval is particularly controversial in the context of today's COVID-19 vaccines, most of which have not been fully approved by the FDA, only authorized for emergency use (EUA), and are still labeled as investigational products. Most people remain unaware of this fact. Nevertheless, earlier in 2021, vaccine manufacturers began seeking full regulatory approval after just 6 months of trial data. On May 7, Pfizer formally submitted its request to the FDA, aiming to become the first fully approved COVID-19 vaccine. On August 23, the FDA granted full approval. But with millions of vaccines already distributed under the EUA, what was the rush? Historically, for the 6 first-in-disease vaccines approved by the FDA in the past 15 years, the average trial duration was nearly 2 years. A vaccine approved after just 6 months of data ranks among the fastest in history. Although Phase 3 clinical trials for Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen are all scheduled to last 2 years, the FDA never clearly stated its position on the minimum follow-up period required before considering full approval. Long-term, placebo-controlled trials are essential to evaluate vaccine safety. It is, therefore, deeply concerning that shortly after receiving EUA, the vaccine makers began unblinding their trials, offering those in the placebo group the opportunity to get vaccinated. Moderna announced. As of April 13, all placebo participants have been offered the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, and 98% of them have received it. This means Moderna's placebo group no longer exists, and thus there is no way to accurately measure long-term safety. The same applies to Pfizer. In an article for the British Medical Journal, Peter Doshi cited multiple statements from the FDA emphasizing that maintaining a placebo group is crucial for assessing both safety and efficacy, which is obvious to anyone who understands the consequences of abandoning scientific rigor during the testing of a new medical therapy. In fact, of the more than 200 drugs approved by the FDA between 2000 and 2010, one-third later exhibited serious safety issues. There may be many reasons why manufacturers want FDA approval, but perhaps the top one is the stamp of legitimacy that full authorization provides, and the ability to use it to convince skeptics of vaccine safety and effectiveness. Full approval also paves the way for mandates, putting enormous pressure on the awake class, those resisting the agenda of the Great Reset/Great Convergence. The FDA's evaluation and approval process for these experimental vaccines contains even more troubling inconsistencies. For example, the FDA recently warned against using antibody tests to evaluate immunity or protection against COVID-19, especially after vaccination, even though its original EUA was granted in part because of the reported antibody responses. This reversal implies that the EUA itself should be revoked, but what are the chances of that happening now that millions have already been vaccinated? Furthermore, the very notion that antibodies provide protection against viral infections represents a misunderstanding of the immune system. Medical scientists have known since the 1950s that antibodies play little role in viral infections, based on studies showing that people with a genetic inability to produce antibodies, a condition called agammaglobulinemia, have normal reactions to typical viral infections, and even appear resistant to reinfections. Bill Gates, Moderna, and Eugenics 2.0. One of the most talked about COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers in the media is Moderna, a biotechnology company co-founded by Robert Langer, a researcher and inventor at MIT. In 2013, the biotech startup received $25 million in funding from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a research branch of the U.S. Department of Defense well known for aggressively pursuing dystopian and transhumanist technologies, such as implantable nanoparticles and brain-machine interfaces. More on this later. Notably, the U.S. government, through the National Institutes of Health, NIH, appears to have a financial stake in Moderna's vaccine thanks to a contract signed by both parties that grants the NIH joint ownership of Moderna's mRNA vaccine candidates. According to Axios, the NIH mostly funds outside research, but it also frequently invents basic scientific technologies that are then licensed and incorporated into drugs sold for huge profits. This is more than alarming, considering that the NIH is responsible for prioritizing promising COVID-19 treatments and improving clinical trial effectiveness, tasks that are clearly compromised by its financial interest in Moderna's success. This conflict of interest could also explain why Moderna, a company that had failed for over 10 years to bring a single product to market, nonetheless received an EUA, emergency use authorization, for its vaccine. In an interview with the Economic Club, NIH Director Francis Collins denied that the COVID-19 vaccines were profit-driven, saying that nobody sees this as a way to make billions of dollars. However, the evidence tells a different story. Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine sales reached $1.7 billion in the first quarter of 2021, instantly turning its CEO, Stephen Bancel, into one of the pharmaceutical industry's many new billionaires. The Operation Warp Speed initiative, a partnership among several U.S. federal agencies created to accelerate COVID-19 vaccine development, was also plagued by conflicts of interest. Its administration hired multiple consultants tied to Big Pharma, including 2 former Pfizer executives. In May 2020, reports revealed that Dr. Monsef Slawi, the initiative's chief advisor and a former pharmaceutical executive himself, owned $10 million in stock in GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. The same company later awarded a $2 billion contract to supply the U.S. government with 100 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Slawi also held substantial shares in Moderna, which received over $2.5 billion in federal funding. Robert Langer and transhumanist research. Moderna's co-founder Robert Langer, whose net worth also soared into the billions, is one of the most cited scientists in the world. An MIT researcher, Langer holds over 1,400 patents and specializes in biotechnology, nanotechnology, tissue engineering, and drug delivery. He also serves in an administrative role at the MIT Media Lab, the same institute embroiled in scandal after it was revealed that it had accepted funding from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was known for his disturbing fascination with transhumanism, a modern version of eugenics focused on merging humans with machines. The lab's then-director, Joy Ito, approved 2 donations from Epstein totaling $1.75 million, and even allowed Epstein to channel funds from other wealthy donors, including a $2 million donation from Bill Gates, who also had disturbing ties to Epstein. Gates flew on Epstein's private jet and met with him several times. When news broke and Joy Ito resigned, Langer was among the first to sign a letter urging him to stay, and as a senior administrator, it's hard to believe Langer was unaware of Epstein's donations beforehand. Described as a common denominator in various coronavirus-related efforts, Langer plays a central role in the transhumanist movement. In 2015, his company Microchip's biotech partnered with Israeli pharmaceutical giant Teva Pharmaceuticals to commercialize an implantable drug delivery device. Teva, notably, has received significant investments from Warren Buffett, who in 2006 pledged to donate his entire fortune to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he served as a trustee until recently. Langer also has ties to Charles Lieber, a Harvard nanotechnology scientist arrested in January 2020 for making false statements to federal authorities about his collaboration with researchers at the Wuhan University of Technology. In 2012, Langer and Lieber worked together to create a material that fuses nanoscale electronics with biological tissues, described as a first step toward prosthetics that communicate directly with the nervous system. Gates' involvement in eugenic legacy. Much of Langer's research is funded by Bill Gates, who began investing in mRNA technology in 2010 and has poured millions of dollars into Moderna. In 2017, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation sponsored a project in Langer's lab to create a microparticle-based vaccine delivery system capable of releasing doses over time through a single injection. Then, in 2019, Gates and Langer teamed up again to develop an invisible ink tattoo that could embed vaccination records into a child's skin. Disturbingly, the ultimate goal of the project was to inject sensors that could be used to track other aspects of health. Gates claims he needs such data for disease prevention, referencing his efforts to eradicate polio, measles, and other infectious diseases worldwide. However, Gates' numerous health initiatives in developing countries are not the work of a benevolent philanthropist, as the media portrays. Evidence suggests that his involvement in public health represents the continuation of a long-standing eugenics program, hidden in plain sight. Gates' ties to the eugenics movement begin with his father, who praised the Rockefeller Foundation for its work in public health. He even met with the Rockefellers in the year 2000 to discuss infectious diseases, vaccines, and environmental issues. During that meeting, Gates Sr. was quoted saying, "Taking our lead and inspiration from the work already done by the Rockefeller Foundation, our foundation effectively began Gavi by pledging $750 million to something called the Global Fund for Children's Vaccines, an instrument of Gavi." Interestingly, nearly a decade later, Bill Gates Jr. co-organized a meeting with David Rockefeller to discuss population reduction. Even more revealing, in 2012, Bill and Melinda Gates hosted the London Family Planning Summit, where they reaffirmed their commitment to population control in the developing world, exactly 100 years after the first International Eugenics Congress, also held in London. Gates' controversial vaccination projects and profits. Bill Gates is well known for his obsession with vaccines, a curious endeavor considering that the 9 million people who die every year from hunger would be better served with clean water, food supplies, and sanitary living conditions rather than vaccines. In 2009, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded observational studies in India for a controversial cervical cancer vaccine called Gardasil, administered to thousands of young girls. Within months, many began suffering from severe health problems, and within a year, 5 of them had died. During a similar study for another brand of HPV vaccine, several girls were hospitalized, and 2 more died. The Economic Times of India reported in 2014 with the shocking revelation that consent for carrying out these studies was, in many cases, obtained from hostile wardens, an outright violation of ethical norms. In many other cases, the thumbprints of poor and illiterate parents were simply affixed to consent forms. The girls themselves had no idea of the nature of the disease or the vaccine. The authorities could not provide the necessary consent forms for many of the vaccinated girls. Gates also heavily promoted the oral polio vaccine in India, attempting to eradicate the disease. However, as already discussed earlier, chemical toxins play a major role in the cause of polio, meaning the disease cannot be eliminated through vaccination. In fact, global health statistics now show that there are more cases of polio caused by the vaccines themselves than from any other source. In 2018, a group of courageous Indian researchers published a paper in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health showing a correlation between oral polio vaccination campaigns and an increase in cases of acute flaccid paralysis, AFP, a condition described as clinically indistinguishable from poliomyelitis. Ironically, Gates has a $23 million investment in Monsanto, the company that markets Roundup, a pesticide containing glyphosate, which is known to cause serious health problems, including neurological disorders and paralysis. The business of vaccines. While many people believe that Gates generously donates his fortune to fund vaccination campaigns, it should be noted that his investments in vaccines have generated enormous profit. By 2019, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had donated over $10 billion to various vaccine initiatives, including Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. Gates called this the best investment I've ever made, estimating a 20-to-1 return, roughly $200 billion over 20 years. In fact, Gates' net worth has more than doubled in the past decade. And let's not forget more than half of all deaths in low- and middle-income countries are caused by non-communicable diseases, an area in which the Gates Foundation shows little interest, directing less than 3% of its budget towards such conditions. Conflicts of interest. Furthermore, Gates' activities in global health are riddled with conflicts of interest that undermine the idea that he genuinely cares about human well-being. Many of these conflicts are described in a study by Harvard researcher David Stuckler, titled Global Health Philanthropy and Institutional Relationships, How Should Conflicts of Interest Be Addressed? Stuckler writes, for example, we found that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has significant holdings in the Coca-Cola Corporation, and also funds grants that encourage communities in developing countries to become Coca-Cola bottlers. Some commentators have noted that sugary beverages like those produced by Coca-Cola are linked to the rapid rise of obesity and diabetes in the developing world. He further notes, many of the foundation's grants for the development of pharmaceuticals may benefit major drug companies such as Merck and GlaxoSmithKline. Several of these grants are linked to companies represented on the foundation's investment board. It is not surprising that the mainstream media rarely reports on these disturbing conflicts of interest, especially since Gates funds nearly all major news outlets. The return of eugenics through technology. Describing the reckless and widespread distribution of experimental COVID-19 vaccines as an initiative rooted in eugenic thinking is not an exaggeration, given how many individuals and institutions involved in vaccine production have direct links to the eugenics movement. For instance, the promoters of the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine are also connected to the British Eugenics Society, now rebranded under another name, an organization founded by Francis Galton, the so-called father of eugenics. These connections are detailed by investigative journalist Whitney Webb in her article. The developers of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine are tied to the UK eugenics movement. When it comes to protecting public health, the recklessness of politicians, scientists, and pharmaceutical corporations is inexcusable, especially considering the global impact of these experimental vaccines. We are already witnessing the results of releasing a dangerous gene therapy technology onto a trusting, uninformed public. The VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, has recorded more deaths related to COVID-19 vaccines than from all other vaccines combined over the past 30 years. However, none of this is surprising if we consider the rush with which the clinical trials were conducted and the question marks surrounding the reliability of the reported data. For example, vaccine manufacturers reported that their vaccines were 95% effective, a figure they reached by using relative risk reduction instead of absolute risk reduction, which was around 1% in most cases, a fact never highlighted by the media. In addition, the vaccine trials were not designed to evaluate the effect of these injections on infection, transmission, hospitalization, or death, which is bewildering, considering that if there truly were a viral pandemic, these would be the most important endpoints to test. Perhaps this was a calculated move by vaccine manufacturers, who knew they would have a better chance of manipulating results using the endpoint of COVID-19 of any severity. After all, the dramatic rise in flu vaccine use has not been associated with a decline in mortality. Peter Doshi, editor of the British Medical Journal, has questioned numerous aspects of the controversial vaccine trials, such as the possibility that painkillers masked COVID-19 symptoms in trial participants and the objectivity of the primary event adjudication committees responsible for counting COVID-19 cases, in Pfizer's case, a committee composed of its own employees. Recently, Doctors for COVID Ethics, a group founded by physicians Michael Palmer, Suchert Bhakdi, and Stephen Hockerts, published an expert statement regarding the danger and efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine, which was submitted as part of a lawsuit challenging the EU's authorization of the vaccine for children aged 12 and older. The document states that the reported efficacy of Pfizer's mRNA vaccine was very likely entirely fraudulent, and that Pfizer, the EMA, and the FDA systematically ignored preclinical animal trial evidence clearly pointing to severe risks of adverse effects. But of course, none of this reaches the mainstream narrative. Instead, we are repeatedly fed the same slogans: the vaccines are safe and effective, follow the science, listen to the experts. And by experts, they mean, of course, soulless pharmaceutical puppets like Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, who has been spreading lies about so-called viral infections since the AIDS outbreak in 1984. The fact that someone like Fauci has held his position for over 30 years is revealing of how the system truly works. The late Nobel laureate and inventor of the polymerase chain reaction, PCR, Kary Mullis, lambasted Fauci in an interview, saying, "He really doesn't know anything about anything, and I would say that to his face. Nothing. This man thinks you can take a blood sample and put it in an electron microscope, and if there's a virus, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine. He should not be in a position like he's in. Tony Fauci doesn't mind going on television in front of the people who pay his salary and lying straight to the camera. A transhumanist future." Besides being gene therapies, a technology associated with eugenics and transhumanism, scientists claim that mRNA technology allows for the rapid development of new vaccines in a very short time, weeks instead of months. Therefore, we may be facing the possibility of a future filled with on-demand vaccines created to protect the public from new and invisible threats. In fact, with vaccinators already talking about variants, booster shots, and periodic COVID-19 vaccine updates, it seems things are indeed headed that way. And, of course, thanks to the intelligence-linked big tech conglomerates, all of this data will be recorded in a vaccine passport tied to your smartphone, which will undoubtedly form the basis of a new type of digital identity pass linked to your bank account and, eventually, to your social credit score. Indeed, in 2019, Bill Gates's Microsoft filed a patent aptly numbered W02020060606 for a cryptocurrency system using body activity data, another clue to the true intentions of the technocratic elite funding and promoting the transhumanist agenda. The very title of the patent evokes images of a slave society in which human beings are equipped with biosensors and rewarded with digital currency for completing tasks assigned by the ruling elite. Perhaps even more alarming is the rush to license genetic therapies for use in small children. Pfizer is currently conducting a global clinical trial testing its mRNA injections in babies as young as 6 months old, despite the fact that COVID-19, assuming such a disease even exists, hardly affects children at all. In fact, according to CDC figures, the infection fatality rate, IFR, in children is 20 per million, or 0.002%, which is probably lower than the risk of permanent injury or death from the MMR, measles mumps rubella, vaccine. It is also lower than the fatality rate of the COVID-19 vaccine itself, calculated from VIRS data at the time of writing, 5,612 deaths among 165 million fully vaccinated Americans equals 0.003%. Moreover, research has linked the Pfizer vaccine to symptomatic myocarditis, with an estimated incidence rate of 1 in 30,000 or 1 in 60,000 young men. The rush to integrate mRNA vaccines into the mainstream as part of the regular childhood vaccination schedule has nothing to do with health or protection, it is a step toward a far more sinister goal: control over the human body itself. As mentioned earlier in this article, DARPA, the research arm of the U.S. Department of Defense, has been working to create nanotechnology capable of interacting with biological cells. In 2014, DARPA launched its In Vivo Nanoplatforms, IVN, program, aimed at developing implantable nanoplatforms to collect biological data and provide continuous physiological monitoring. Since then, the program has helped create injectable hydrogels that monitor physiological responses and can sync with a smartphone. Additionally, DARPA, along with the NIH, heavily funds Prophecies, a biotechnology company backed by Google that develops and markets this same injectable hydrogel technology, now presented as a way to detect future pandemics. Reportedly, Prophecies sensors can detect flu-like infections even before symptoms appear. While incredibly disturbing, this is only a step toward DARPA's ultimate goal, establishing dominance over the mind. This goal is reflected in DARPA's research into creating mutant-powered soldiers, using genetic weaponry, capable of undermining people's minds and bodies through a range of chemical, neurological, genetic, and behavioral techniques. DARPA is also studying ways to genetically manipulate the brain to read people's thoughts and induce images and sounds into their minds. The research involves the use of magnetic nanoparticles, the same technology that some speculate could be included in current or future COVID-19 vaccines. Equally disturbing is Wellcome Leap, a new initiative created by the Wellcome Trust, linked to eugenics and the world's wealthiest medical research foundation, in collaboration with 2 former DARPA executives. The program's stated goal is to achieve breakthroughs in human health within 5 to 10 years and deliver seemingly impossible results within seemingly impossible timeframes. The initiative currently has 5 major projects, the first of which is RNA Readiness Plus Response, which aims, emphasis added, to create a self-sustaining network of globally distributed, state-of-the-art manufacturing facilities to provide surge capacity to meet future pandemic needs, referring to the manufacture of RNA-based products, mRNA gene therapies. Note the implied certainty of a future pandemic. However, the most unsettling Wellcome Leap project is undoubtedly the first one, 000 Days, 1KD, a program intended to use infants as test subjects to monitor their brain development and create AI models that can be used to accurately predict and improve executive function, EF, outcomes. The project also contemplates the use of mobile, wearable, and home-based sensors. In a detailed article on the matter, researcher Whitney Webb writes, "True to the Wellcome Trust's eugenic roots, which will be examined further in Part 2, Wellcome Leap's 1KD notes that what is of interest are subnormative EF improvements or normative EF improvements across the population for maximum impact. One of 1KD's goals is therefore not to treat a disease or address a global public health challenge, but to experiment with cognitive enhancement in children using AI-driven and surveillance-based invasive technology. The 5 to 10-year timeline of Welcome Leap coincides with elite figure Elon Musk's Neuralink project, which aims to establish the future of brain interfaces to expand our capabilities. In an interview, Musk stated, "I think we're about 8 to 10 years away from this being usable by people without disabilities." Musk, whose wealth increased by more than 500% during the COVID-19 pandemic, founded Neuralink in 2016. The company recently raised $205 million in funding from 7 venture capital firms, including Google's GV, and 5 Silicon Valley executives. However, Neuralink is not the only biotech company pursuing this technology. Recently, Synchron, a small biotechnology firm and competitor to Neuralink, received FDA approval to begin testing its brain chip implants in humans. 10 years from now will take us to 2030, a year that appears again and again as the projected point when transhumanist technologies will become mainstream in society. According to predictions by the U.S. National Intelligence Council, human augmentation, the fusion of man and machine, will be a major theme by 2030. Their report, Global Trends 2030, published in 2012, states, "Successful prosthetics will likely be directly integrated with the user's body. Brain-machine interfaces could provide superhuman abilities, enhancing strength and speed, as well as offering functions not previously available." Interestingly, the report also predicts a new, easily transmissible respiratory pathogen that could cause a massive and disruptive global impact. The report continues, stating, "Unlike other disruptive global events, such an outbreak would result in a global pandemic that would directly cause suffering and death in every corner of the world, likely in less than 6 months. Slavery, a matter of free will. The deployment of mRNA genetic therapies and the push toward a transhumanist society represent the continuation of the eugenics movement, which was based on the pseudoscientific concept that some humans, by virtue of their genetic composition, were more fit to lead society than others. The hero of the polio epidemic, Jonas Salk, had his own ties to eugenics, as did the institute that bears his name, the Salk Institute. His research on mRNA, funded by the NIH, laid the groundwork for the development and mass dissemination of gene therapies controversially labeled as vaccines. The danger of this experimental technology is evident, as it has caused thousands of injuries and deaths worldwide. The role of intelligence agencies, billionaire technocrats, and pharmaceutical initiatives in financing, researching, and promoting mRNA vaccines, bioneural interfaces, gene editing, and other technologies steeped in eugenic ideals paints the picture of a global agenda that will reach its full expression by 2030. The current COVID-19 pandemic has served as a means to accelerate this agenda through the centralization of wealth and power, bringing transhumanist technology into the mainstream and normalizing authoritarian governance. The Pfizer infant trials and Welcome Leap's alarming 1KD project indicate that the key to this agenda is the conditioning and control of children from an early age, something Aldous Huxley detailed extensively in his eerily prophetic eugenic novel Brave New World. This agenda, though backed by some of the most powerful individuals and institutions on Earth, has an obvious weakness: its success depends on our compliance. It will only advance if we allow it. Therefore, it is up to each of us, through compassionate, non-violent resistance, to plant the seeds of awakening within the collective consciousness of humanity. Could the new COVID vaccine mark the beginning of transhumanism? By Dr. Joseph Mercola, published on September 14, 2020. The goal of the transhumanist movement, or Human 2.0, is to transcend biology through technology, to merge human biology with technology and artificial intelligence. And right now, we may be standing at that transhumanist crossroads, thanks to the rapid development of one or more mRNA vaccines against COVID-19. The mRNA COVID-19 vaccines are designed to make your cells produce the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. This is achieved through a process called transfection, which is also used to create genetically modified organisms. Transfection can have temporary or permanent effects on the genome, and it is not known how COVID-19 vaccines might affect the human genome in the long term. In 2019, researchers discovered that Pandemrix, the swine flu vaccine from the 2009 pandemic, caused narcolepsy by affecting a non-coding RNA gene that regulates the production of the glial cell line-derived neurotrophic factor, GDNF, a protein critical for neuronal survival. Therefore, if a conventional vaccine can have genetic effects, the risk that mRNA vaccines may have genetic effects is even greater. 2 years ago, in October 2018, Neil Sahota, a Forbes contributor, United Nations AI advisor, and UC Irvine professor, warned that transhumanism is closer than ever and likely to arrive sooner than we imagined. In recent years, there's been considerable debate about the idea that technology is slowly taking over us, that we are becoming transhuman, with upgraded abilities, including enhanced intelligence, strength, and awareness, Sahota writes. The goal of the transhumanist movement, or Human 2.0, is to transcend biology through technology, or, as Dr. Carrie Madej explains in the following video, to fuse human biology with technology and artificial intelligence. Two of the major proponents of transhumanism are Ray Kurzweil, Director of Engineering at Google since 2012, and Elon Musk, founder of SpaceX, Tesla, and Neuralink. We are facing the era of transhumanism. According to Dr. Carrie Madej, we might right now be standing at that crossroads of transhumanism, thanks to the rapid development of one or more mRNA vaccines against COVID-19. Many of the COVID-19 vaccines being developed so quickly are not conventional vaccines. Their design aims to manipulate your own biology and, therefore, has the potential to alter the biology of the entire human race. Conventional vaccines make the body recognize and respond to viral proteins by injecting a small amount of the viral protein into the body, which then triggers an immune response and the development of antibodies. However, the mRNA vaccine is different. The theory behind these vaccines is that when you inject mRNA into your cells, it will stimulate them to produce their own viral protein. The COVID-19 mRNA vaccine will be the first of its kind. Never before has an mRNA vaccine been authorized for development. And to make matters worse, not all animal safety tests are being conducted. Madej discusses some of the backgrounds of certain individuals involved in developing a COVID-19 vaccine, which seems more like a race than a search for a cure. One of these individuals is Moderna co-founder Derek Rossi, a Harvard researcher who successfully reprogrammed stem cells using modified RNA, thus changing the function of those stem cells. Moderna was founded on this very concept, altering human biological function through genetic engineering, says Madej. Side effects should be expected. As mentioned, mRNA vaccines are designed to make your cells produce the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2, the glycoprotein that binds to the cell's ACE2 receptor. This is the first stage of the process the virus uses to enter cells. The idea is that by creating the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, your immune system will begin producing antibodies. However, according to the vaccine reaction, researchers have pointed out possible drawbacks. According to researchers at the University of Pennsylvania and Duke University, mRNA vaccines have potential safety issues such as local and systemic inflammation, stimulation of self-reactive antibodies and autoimmunity, as well as the development of edema, swelling, and blood clots. Systemic inflammation, self-reactive antibodies, and autoimmune issues represent major problems. In fact, these are largely the reasons why all previous attempts to create a coronavirus vaccine have failed. For the past 20 years, research into coronavirus vaccines has repeatedly produced the same adverse outcome, paradoxical immune enhancement. This happens because coronaviruses produce two different types of antibodies, neutralizing antibodies, which fight infection, and binding antibodies, also known as non-neutralizing antibodies, which cannot prevent viral infection. Unable to prevent infection, binding antibodies can trigger antibody-dependent enhancement, meaning things look fine until you encounter the real virus, and then the outcome is far worse than it should have been. In one coronavirus vaccine trial using ferrets, all the vaccinated animals died when later exposed to the real virus. According to MatEdge, animal studies have also shown that the type of mRNA technology introduced through this vaccine may increase the risk of cancer and mutagenesis, genetic mutations. Everything you need to know about the delivery system. MatEdge also discusses the delivery system of this mRNA vaccine. Instead of a conventional injection, the vaccine will be administered using a microneedle patch platform. This not only allows mass production but also makes it possible for the vaccine to be applied by anyone, as simple as putting on an adhesive bandage on your arm. The adhesive side of the bandage contains rows of tiny microneedles and a hydrogel base containing the enzyme luciferase and the vaccine itself. Due to their small size, the microneedles are said to be painless when pressed into the skin. The idea is that these microneedles will pierce the skin and deliver the synthetic modified RNA into the nucleus of your cells. RNA is a coding material used by your body. In this case, as mentioned, the instructions are to produce the viral spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. Synthetic genes can be patented. If inserting synthetic RNA ends up creating permanent changes in the genome, humans could have patentable genes. But if patents have owners, and owners hold rights to those patents, what would that mean for us? According to MatEdge, the problem with all this is that they are using a process called transfection, which is used to create genetically modified organisms, GMOs. She points out that studies have confirmed that GMO foods are not as healthy as conventional foods. The question is, could this affect our health? Vaccine manufacturers have stated that this will not alter our DNA or our genome, says MatEdge. I say that's not true, because if we use this process to make a genetically modified organism, why wouldn't it have the same effect on a human? I don't know why they say that. The definition of transfection says it can be a temporary change in the cell, and I think that's what the vaccine manufacturers are banking on. Or, there is the possibility that it becomes stabilized, integrates into the genome, and is so stable that it starts replicating when the genome replicates. That means it would now be part of your genome, but permanently. That's another possibility. In other words, it could be temporary, or it could be permanent. DNA, luciferase, and patentable nanotechnologies. Obviously, it will take many years after the experimental rollout to know whether the vaccine causes temporary or permanent change, and that's very important. Why? Because synthetic genes can be patented. So if inserting synthetic RNA ends up creating permanent changes in the genome, humans will have patentable genes. But if the patents have owners, and owners have rights, then what would that mean for humanity? Another feature of this delivery system that raises red flags is the use of the enzyme luciferase, which has bioluminescent properties. Although invisible under normal conditions, by using a smartphone app or a special device, one could see the glow of their vaccination mark. As described in the journal RSC Advances in 2015, quantum dots loaded with luciferase genes can efficiently deliver genes into cells. The article's abstract discusses their use as self-illuminating probes for imaging hepatoma, but the fact that quantum dots can deliver genetic material is significant on its own. Meanwhile, the hydrogel, an invention of DARPA, involves nanotechnology and nanobots. According to MatEdge, this bioelectronic interface is part of how the vaccination mark could connect to your smartphone and provide information about your blood sugar, heart rate, and other biological data. It has the potential to see almost anything happening inside your body, says MatEdge. This raises major privacy concerns, since there has been no clear explanation of where all that data will go. Who will collect and access all this information? Who will protect it? How will it be used? Moreover, if your smartphone can receive information from your body, what about the reverse? Could transmissions affect our mood, behavior, physical function, or even thoughts and memories? What is transhumanism? Transhumanism is a philosophical and scientific movement that seeks to enhance the human condition through technology, merging biology with artificial intelligence, robotics, and genetic engineering. Its ultimate goal is to transcend human limitations, including aging, disease, and even death, to create a new humanity that is more advanced, more efficient, and immortal. According to Dr. Carrie Madej, however, this ideology is profoundly dangerous, because it views human beings as machines that can be upgraded, modified, or controlled. In its most extreme form, transhumanism sees consciousness as a computer program that can eventually be uploaded into a digital format, a simulation where biological life becomes unnecessary. Transhumanists believe that by merging humans with technology, they can achieve godlike power, becoming creators of their own destiny. But as Madej explains, this also implies that whoever controls the technology will control humanity itself. She warns that the current global push toward mass genetic modification through mRNA vaccines is the first real step toward this vision. These vaccines, according to her, prepare the body to become compatible with future nanotechnological systems, capable of monitoring and even influencing human biological and psychological functions. This is not just about health, she says. This is about control, complete control over our bodies and minds. Once we allow synthetic genetic material and nanotechnology to merge with our biology, we may never be able to separate the two again. The religious and ethical implications. Many spiritual leaders and ethicists have pointed out that transhumanism represents a rebellion against divine order, the attempt to recreate humanity in the image of machines rather than God. Madej emphasizes that humans were created as perfect beings, with extraordinary regenerative and adaptive abilities. The transhumanist ideology, however, promotes the idea that humans are flawed and in need of technological improvement. This way of thinking, she warns, could lead to a loss of humanity itself. Once we begin to alter the blueprint of life, our DNA, and integrate artificial intelligence into our biological systems, we risk becoming something entirely different, post-human. If you look at the symbolism used by the elites who fund these projects, Madej notes, you'll see their obsession with immortality, power, and knowledge, the same temptation that led to humanity's fall in the Garden of Eden. They want to become gods. This raises deep questions about free will and soul identity. If technology can alter human thought, emotion, and behavior, what happens to individuality, conscience, or the ability to make moral choices? According to Madej, this is not science fiction, it is happening now through the integration of nanotechnology, 5G communication systems, and artificial intelligence, all working toward a global network capable of monitoring and influencing human beings in real time. The role of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, AI, is central to the transhumanist agenda. AI systems are already being used to monitor behavior, predict decisions, and control access to services through digital identity systems. Madej explains that once AI becomes integrated with biological systems through neural interfaces or nanotech sensors, it could begin to learn from and even reprogram the human body. This technology will know everything about you, what you eat, what you think, what you feel, she says. Eventually, it could know you better than you know yourself. Companies like Neuralink, Elon Musk, Google DeepMind, and DARPA-funded projects are developing interfaces capable of connecting the human brain directly to digital systems. This means that thoughts, memories, and emotions could potentially be uploaded, analyzed, or even modified by external algorithms. In combination with mRNA genetic technologies, these interfaces could make humans biologically programmable. Imagine a future where your body is a device connected to a network, where updates can be downloaded the way we update our phones, Madej warns. That's the future they're preparing us for, and they're calling it progress. The warning and the choice. Dr. Madej concludes by urging humanity to pause and reflect before embracing technologies that alter what it means to be human. This is the moment when we must decide whether to remain human, created in the image of God, or to become something else entirely, a hybrid of flesh and machine, she says. They are using fear, the fear of disease, the fear of death, to push humanity into accepting irreversible changes to our biology. But remember, this only works if we consent. She reminds listeners that the power of free will still exists, and that each person can choose to protect their body, their spirit, and their divine identity from manipulation. They may control governments, corporations, and technology, she adds, but they cannot control your soul unless you give them permission. The final message. Transhumanism promises perfection, but it risks erasing humanity. The COVID-19 pandemic, according to Dr. Madej and other researchers, has been used as a global gateway to normalize genetic modification, digital surveillance, and the merging of biology with artificial systems. The danger is not just physical but spiritual. Once the human genome is permanently altered, the unique connection between the body, mind, and soul, as designed by the Creator, could be lost. We are standing at the threshold, Madej says. If we cross it blindly, there will be no going back. At first glance, all of this might sound like a dystopian fantasy, something straight out of science fiction. However, what makes this era particularly alarming is that the very technologies once considered speculative or impossible are now emerging in real time, backed by billions of dollars in government and private funding. Projects once confined to theoretical laboratories are now being tested in humans. The world's most powerful organizations, from the World Economic Forum, WEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to DARPA, Google, and Pfizer, have converged on a single narrative, that human enhancement and genetic modification are the next step in evolution. But as history has shown, whenever elites attempt to redefine humanity in the name of progress, the result is almost always suffering and loss of freedom. The justification for these programs, whether it be public health, pandemic prevention, or climate adaptation, often hides a much darker motive: control. Through surveillance systems, AI integration, and genetic manipulation, the new technocracy seeks not only to reshape society but to reshape the human being itself. The COVID-19 crisis has exposed how quickly entire populations can be convinced to surrender their rights in exchange for safety, a trade that opens the door to a world where obedience replaces autonomy and algorithm replaces conscience. The danger, as one researcher noted, is not that machines will become more like humans, but that humans will become more like machines. The reprogramming of humanity. The introduction of mRNA vaccines marks the beginning of an unprecedented experiment, not only on a biological level but also on a psychological and societal level. It has normalized the idea that our bodies can and should be updated using biotechnology. Each booster, each digital passport, and each proposed implant moves us a little closer to a system where human beings are no longer self-determined but externally managed biological entities. This process has been accompanied by massive censorship campaigns, the silencing of medical dissent, and the rewriting of science to fit political narratives, a pattern disturbingly reminiscent of totalitarian regimes throughout history. Once people are conditioned to accept genetic modification as routine, the boundary between therapy and transformation disappears. The same technology that claims to protect against disease could easily be repurposed for behavior control, emotional regulation, or even population management. When humans are reprogrammed like software, warns Dr. Madej, who decides what the next update will be, and who gets to refuse it? The call to awareness. The future is not yet fixed. Despite the power of the corporations and governments behind these agendas, their success depends entirely on human consent. Awareness, critical thinking, and spiritual strength are our greatest defenses. Every act of discernment, every refusal to comply blindly, every demand for truth weakens the system of deception that sustains this technocratic order. The time has come to question everything: the information we receive, the motives behind scientific progress, and the real intentions of those who claim to protect us. True health is not found in synthetic injections or artificial upgrades but in harmony with nature, compassion for others, and respect for the divine order of life. Humanity was created free, concludes Dr. Madej. No technology, however advanced, has the right to take that away. Neuralink, the beginning of a psychiatric disaster. Elon Musk is another transhumanist who recently presented us with a completely new abyss, his latest venture, Neuralink, which he unveiled in his last presentation at the end of August. Neuralink is a transcranial implant that uses direct current stimulation. For now, the device is intended to help people with spinal cord or brain injuries. Ultimately, the goal is to merge the human brain with computers. This concerns me deeply, as it could have serious psychological and psychiatric consequences. In an unpublished interview with psychiatrist Dr. Peter Breggin, he also expressed concern about this technology, stating, "What interests me is that, although Musk is very bright, he doesn't know much about the brain. That's probably because the neurosurgeons and psychiatrists he consults with don't know much about the brain either. And what I mean is that this is a stupid idea. He wants to place several electrodes in the brain, in networks of neurons, and apply low-voltage stimulation. That's madness. The brain can't tolerate it. And in that way, he expects to communicate, but there will be no such communication. The brain won't speak through those electrodes. That's not how the brain works. The brain talks to itself. It won't talk to Elon Musk, or anyone else. The only thing he'll achieve is brain damage. Doing this would be terrible. I wish someone who knows Elon Musk would tell him, you should talk to Peter Breggin. He says his advisors don't know the subject. He's already planning to seek FDA approval for some neurological disorders, and I believe that will be the beginning of a fight. Is entering the transhumanism era inevitable? Returning to mRNA vaccines, time will tell how dangerous they are. It's clear that if the changes end up being permanent, the possibility of long-term side effects is much higher than if they turn out to be temporary. In the worst case, any changes that occur could even be generational. The problem is that these issues will not be evident in the short term. In my opinion, this vaccine could become a worldwide catastrophe, something humanity has never experienced before. But we shouldn't be quick to dismiss the idea that these vaccines may cause permanent genetic changes, because there is evidence that even conventional vaccines have the ability to do so, and they don't involve inserting synthetic RNA. The rapid swine flu vaccine caused genetic alterations. After the H1N1 swine flu pandemic of 2009, the AS03 Pandemrix adjuvant swine flu vaccine, a fast-track vaccine used in Europe, but not in the United States in 2009 to 2010, was linked to childhood narcolepsy, whose cases increased significantly in several countries. Children and adolescents in Finland, the United Kingdom, and Sweden were the most affected. Other analyses detected an increase in narcolepsy cases among adults who received the vaccine. However, this link was not as evident as it was among children and adolescents. A study conducted in 2019 reported having found a new relationship between Pandemrix-associated narcolepsy and the non-coding RNA gene GDNF, AS1, a gene that supposedly regulates the production of glial cell line-derived neurotrophic factor, GDNF, a protein that is very important for neuronal survival. They also confirmed a strong relationship between vaccine-induced narcolepsy and a certain haplotype, suggesting that variation in genes related to the immune system and neuronal survival increases susceptibility to Pandemrix-induced narcolepsy in certain people. In addition to that, research has shown that the H1N1 swine flu vaccine was one of 5 inactivated vaccines that increased overall mortality, especially among girls. In 2009, that is, 11 years ago, I wrote an article about swine flu that turned out to contain a rather prophetic warning. The safety and effectiveness of the swine flu vaccine have not been proven, but we do know that it will contain harmful additives. To me, that's obvious. And in the future, whenever a new pandemic appears and authorities recommend that you get vaccinated as quickly as possible, remember this article and ask yourself whether you are really the one benefiting from this recommendation. The swine flu fraud of 1976. We can also learn from the swine flu fraud of 1976, which is discussed in detail in this episode of 60 Minutes, aired in 1979. According to 60 Minutes, fearing a repeat of the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, the government launched its propaganda machine, saying that everyone living in the United States should get vaccinated. According to the program, 46 million Americans were vaccinated against swine flu at that time. In the years that followed, thousands of people filed claims for damages with the federal government. As reported by Smithsonian Magazine in 2017, In the spring of 1976, it seemed like the flu was a real problem. Spoiler alert, it wasn't, and the rushed response caused a medical disaster that still hasn't been fully resolved. Part of the public's hesitation to support vaccines, particularly the flu vaccine, can be traced back to the lasting effects of a 1976 campaign to vaccinate the public against a swine flu strain, explains Rebecca Creston for Discover. This government-led campaign was considered a disaster and left an irreparable mark on public health initiatives, as well as influencing the public's perception of the flu and the flu vaccine. A 1981 report by the U.S. General Accounting Office for Senator John Durkin, Democrat from New Hampshire, explained the following. Before the swine flu program, the government had received very few vaccine-related claims. Since 1963, Public Health Service records showed that only 27 claims had been filed that were not related to swine flu. However, as of December 31, 1979, we found that 3,839 claims and 988 lawsuits had been filed against the government, alleging injuries, death, or other damages resulting from the 45 million swine flu vaccinations administered under the program. An official explained that as of October 2, 1980, there had been 3,965 claims and 1,384 lawsuits filed. Of the 3,965 claims filed, the official said that 316 had been resolved for about $12.3 million. Something should have been learned from the devastating side effects of the pandemrix vaccine. No one anticipated that a flu vaccine could have genetic consequences. Now they propose injecting mRNA to make every cell in your body produce the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. It would be foolish to assume there won't be significant consequences. Perhaps this is the beginning of transhumanism. The swine flu hoax of 1976 should also have taught us a lesson, as it reveals that mass vaccination campaigns have always caused more harm than benefit. How mRNA vaccines work against COVID-19. According to official media directed by the WHO, World Health Organization, in March 4, 2021. mRNA vaccines are a new type of vaccine that protects against infectious diseases. mRNA vaccines teach our cells to produce a protein, or even just a portion of a protein, that triggers an immune response inside our body. The benefit of mRNA vaccines, as with all vaccines, is that vaccinated people are protected without facing the risk of severe consequences if they become infected with COVID-19. COVID-19 vaccines are not interchangeable. If you receive the Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, you should receive the same product for your second dose. Messenger RNA vaccines, also known as mRNA vaccines, are among the first COVID-19 vaccines authorized for use in the United States. A new approach to vaccines. mRNA vaccines are a new type of vaccine that protects against infectious diseases. To trigger an immune response, many traditional vaccines inject a weakened or inactivated germ into our bodies. That is not the case with mRNA vaccines. Instead, these vaccines teach our cells to produce a protein, or even a fragment of one, that triggers an immune response within our body. That immune response, which produces antibodies, is what protects us from infection if the real virus enters our body. How mRNA COVID-19 vaccines work, a closer look. mRNA COVID-19 vaccines give our cells instructions to produce a harmless piece of what is known as the spike protein. The spike protein is found on the surface of the virus that causes COVID-19. First, the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines are injected into the muscle of the upper arm. Once the instructions, mRNA, enter the muscle cells, the cells use them to produce a portion of the protein. Once our body has made that protein piece, the cell breaks down the instructions and gets rid of them. Then, the cell displays the created protein portion on its surface. Our immune system recognizes that the protein does not belong there and begins to produce an immune response and antibodies, just as it would in a natural infection with COVID-19. At the end of the process, our bodies have learned how to protect themselves from future infection. The benefit of mRNA vaccines, like all vaccines, is that they provide protection without exposing people to the risk of serious illness from COVID-19. Facts about mRNA COVID-19 vaccines. mRNA vaccines do not contain the live virus that causes COVID-19. They do not affect or interact with our DNA in any way. The mRNA never enters the cell nucleus, where our DNA, genetic material, is located. The cell breaks down and disposes of the mRNA shortly after it has finished using its instructions. mRNA COVID-19 vaccines will undergo rigorous safety testing. mRNA vaccines were subjected to the same rigorous standards of safety and effectiveness as all other types of vaccines in the United States. The only COVID-19 vaccines that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, will authorize for use in the country, whether through full approval or emergency use authorization, are those that meet these standards. mRNA vaccines are new, but not unknown. Scientists have been studying and working on mRNA vaccines for decades. Interest in these vaccines increased because they can be developed in a laboratory using readily available materials. This means the process can be standardized and scaled up, allowing vaccine development to be faster than traditional methods. Versions of mRNA vaccines have been studied for influenza, Zika, rabies, and cytomegalovirus, CMV. As soon as the necessary information about the virus that causes COVID-19 became available, the scientific community began designing the mRNA instructions so that cells could create the unique spike protein, integrating it into an mRNA vaccine. It is possible that mRNA vaccine technology may one day allow us to achieve protection against multiple diseases, reducing the number of injections needed to guard against common vaccine-preventable illnesses. In addition to vaccines, cancer research has used mRNA technology to trigger the immune system's response to specific cancer cells. Now, let's see various reports. COVID-19 transgenic vaccines, transhumanism, and humans 2.0. Dr. Carrie Madej, a specialist in internal medicine, explains clearly and simply the consequences humanity could face if we introduce vaccines like those being developed by Moderna and other laboratories for SARS-CoV-2. These vaccines experiment with RNA and DNA mutations that have never been tested in humans. There are not even major studies on them in animals. What repercussions could the transfection process, to be applied in this new type of vaccine, have? Does it affect genes permanently? These vaccines can rapidly change who we are, what we are, and where we are going. She explains in detail the consequences of introducing a vaccine that could genetically modify humans through RNA and DNA. She comments on some possible risks of these vaccines. They could increase the risk of cancer and other serious diseases. They could cause autoimmune diseases. They could mutate human genes, not only temporarily but permanently. Don't miss this brief 20-minute video in which the doctor discusses transhumanism and the consequences of altering human genes or connecting humans to artificial intelligence. Video by Dr. Carrie Madej on COVID-19 vaccines that can modify human RNA and DNA. Dr. Bodo Schiffmann, Germany, stated that an RNA vaccine is being prepared that is capable of changing our genetic composition. In the United States, between mid-December 2020 and April 23, 2021, the VAERS, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, reported 544 deaths related to COVID vaccines, about 30 deaths per day, approximately. And, a study from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services determined that only 1% of cases are actually reported to VAERS. That would mean the real number could be 100 times higher, about 400 deaths, or roughly 3,000 deaths per day. Keep in mind that VAERS is a passive data system, it only records reported data. So the numbers could be even higher. In the European Union, as of April 17, 2021, their system Eudravigilance recorded 7,766 deaths. Adding those to the 3,544 in the U.S., that's more than 11,000 deaths. Multiplied by 100, this could mean 100,000 deaths from COVID vaccines, about 10,000 deaths per day on average. The CDC investigates heart inflammation in adolescents and adults vaccinated against COVID-19. In 1995, Dr. Pierre Gilbert described what in 2021 has become a reality: mental and emotional control through inoculation of substances and low-frequency waves. It is still dangerous even to take the COVID test, because there is a risk of infection. More evidence of this so-called PL-endemic. PCR tests, first of all, are highly inaccurate, 96% false positives. Second, they were manufactured long before the pandemic. Furthermore, these tests are contaminated with dangerous materials such as ethylene oxide and graphene oxide. Lastly, and most disturbingly, there is solid evidence that PCR tests and many of the masks we use daily contain morgellons, which are invasive nanodevices that penetrate the body, presumed to be made of graphene oxide, and their purpose is unknown. The symptoms of COVID-19 are the same as those of graphene oxide poisoning. Laboratory results have already revealed what is really inside COVID-19 vaccines, and it was found that between 50% and 90%, depending on the brand, consists of graphene oxide. Coincidentally, the symptoms of graphene oxide poisoning are strikingly similar to those of COVID-19. We now know this nanomaterial is present in vaccines, PCR tests, and masks. Illegal DNRs, ventilators, and involuntary euthanasia. For more than a year, we have received widespread reports of unprecedented and illegal DNRs, do not resuscitate orders. What role did they play in the creation of this pandemic? And are they being used to disguise large-scale euthanasia? The increase in the use of DNR orders, and the suggestion that patients are being forced to sign them, or even that they are signed on their behalf in secret, has been one of the most disturbing narratives to emerge from the last year of this pandemic. As early as April 2020, completely mainstream publications like the Health Service Journal, HSJ, were already publishing articles expressing concern about the unprecedented rise in illegal DNR orders for people with learning disabilities. For example, a man in his 50s with vision loss was admitted to a hospital after a choking episode and was incorrectly diagnosed with coronavirus. He was discharged the next day with a DNR form stating the reason as his blindness and severe learning disabilities. The BBC reported that in Wales, letters were sent to some people instructing them to sign DNRs and telling their families not to call 999 in case of emergency. Meanwhile, in Somerset, Sussex, and Derbyshire, general practitioners sent letters to autism support groups telling them that their members had to sign DNR orders. Some nursing home residents were wrongly subjected to decisions that excluded attempts at cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, leading to potentially preventable deaths. How many people who lost relatives over the past year are in the same situation without even knowing it? How much of the UK's excess mortality in 2020, currently attributed to COVID-19, was in fact caused by these insensitive, and potentially criminal, practices? And, more importantly, was all of this part of a plan? Were these people deliberately allowed to die in order to create an illusory pandemic? Now they are indeed reducing the global population. Effectively, those who were vaccinated might not get sick and die from COVID itself, but from something else. Outbreak of SARS-CoV-2 infections, including COVID-19 vaccine breakthrough infections, associated with large public gatherings, Barnstable County, Massachusetts, July 2021. On July 30, 2021, this report was published online as an early release of MMWR. What does this report add? In July 2021, following multiple large public events in a city in Barnstable County, Massachusetts, 469 COVID-19 cases were identified among Massachusetts residents who had traveled to the city between July 3 and July 17. Of these, 346, 74%, occurred in fully vaccinated individuals. Testing identified the Delta variant in 90% of the samples from 133 patients. Cycle threshold, CT, values were similar between samples from vaccinated and unvaccinated patients. What are the implications for public health practice? Jurisdictions may consider expanded prevention strategies, including universal indoor masking, particularly for large public gatherings involving travelers from areas with varying levels of SARS-CoV-2 transmission. During July 2021, 469 COVID-19 cases associated with multiple summer events and large public gatherings were identified in a Massachusetts city. Vaccination coverage among eligible Massachusetts residents was 69%. Approximately three-quarters, 346, 74%, of the cases occurred in fully vaccinated people, those who had completed a 2-dose mRNA vaccine course, Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna, or received a single-dose Johnson & Johnson, vaccine greater than or equal to 14 days before exposure. Genomic sequencing of samples from 133 patients identified the B.1.617.2 Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2 in 119, 89%, and the Delta sublineage AY.3 in 1%. Overall, 274, 79%, vaccinated patients with breakthrough infections were symptomatic. Among 5 hospitalized COVID-19 patients, 4 were fully vaccinated, no deaths were reported. The RT-PCR cycle threshold, CT, values in samples from 127 vaccinated individuals, median equals 22.77, were similar to those of 84 unvaccinated or partially vaccinated individuals, median equals 21.54. The Delta variant is highly transmissible. Vaccination remains the most important strategy to prevent severe illness and death. On July 27, the CDC recommended that all individuals, including those fully vaccinated, should wear masks in public indoor settings in areas with substantial or high transmission of COVID-19. The findings of this investigation suggest that even jurisdictions without high or substantial transmission could consider expanding prevention strategies, including indoor masking, regardless of vaccination status, due to the potential infection risk during large public gatherings involving travelers from various regions. Between July 3 and July 17, 2021, multiple summer events and large public gatherings took place in a city in Barnstable County, Massachusetts, attracting thousands of tourists from across the United States. Beginning on July 10, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, MADPH, received reports of an increase in COVID-19 cases among people who lived in or had recently visited the county, including fully vaccinated individuals. People with COVID-19 reported attending crowded indoor and outdoor events in venues such as bars, restaurants, guesthouses, and rental homes. On July 3, MADPH had reported a 14-day average COVID-19 incidence of 0 cases per 100,000 people per day among city residents in Barnstable County. By July 17, that 14-day average incidence had risen to 177 cases per 100,000 people per day among city residents. Between July 10 and July 26, using travel history data from the state's COVID-19 surveillance system, MADPH identified a cluster of cases among Massachusetts residents. Local health jurisdictions identified additional cases through case investigations. COVID-19 cases were compared to the state immunization registry. A cluster-associated case was defined as a positive SARS-CoV-2 test, by nucleic acid amplification or antigen test, less than or equal to 14 days after travel to or residence in the city in Barnstable County between July 3 to 17. Breakthrough COVID-19 vaccine cases were those in Massachusetts residents who were fully vaccinated, with documentation in the state registry showing completion of COVID-19 vaccination as recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, greater than or equal to 14 days before exposure. Specimens were sent for whole genome sequencing to the Massachusetts State Public Health Laboratory or the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Cycle threshold, CT, values were obtained for 211 samples tested using a non-commercial real-time RT-PCR panel for SARS-CoV-2 conducted under emergency use authorization on the Broad Institute's clinical research sequencing platform. On July 15, MADPH issued the first of two Epidemic Information Exchange notifications to identify additional cases among residents of U.S. jurisdictions outside Massachusetts associated with recent travel to the city in Barnstable County during July 2021. This activity was reviewed by the CDC and conducted in accordance with applicable federal law and CDC policy. By July 26, a total of 469 COVID-19 cases had been identified among Massachusetts residents. The dates of positive specimen collection ranged from July 6 to July 25. Most cases occurred among men, 85%, with a median age of 40 years, range, less than 1 to 76 years. Nearly half, 199, 42%, reported residence in the city within Barnstable County. In total, 346, 74%, individuals with COVID-19 reported symptoms consistent with infection. 5 were hospitalized. As of July 27, no deaths had been reported. One hospitalized patient, aged 50 to 59 years, was unvaccinated and had multiple underlying medical conditions. 4 additional fully vaccinated patients aged 20 to 70 years were also hospitalized, 2 of whom had underlying health conditions. Initial genomic sequencing of samples from 133 patients identified the Delta variant in 119, 89%, cases and the Delta sublineage AY. 3 in 1% case, 13 samples, 10%, failed sequencing. Among the 469 cases in Massachusetts residents, 346, 74%, occurred in fully vaccinated individuals. Of these, 301, 87%, were men, with a median age of 42 years. The vaccine products received by those with breakthrough infections were Pfizer-BioNTech, 159, 46%, Moderna, 131, 38%, and Janssen, 56, 16%. Among the general Massachusetts vaccinated population, 56% had received Pfizer-BioNTech, 38% Moderna, and 7% Janssen. Among individuals with breakthrough infections, 274, 79%, reported symptoms, the most common being cough, headache, sore throat, muscle pain, and fever. Among symptomatic, fully vaccinated individuals, the median interval between completion of vaccination, greater than or equal to 14 days after the final dose, and onset of symptoms was 86 days, range, 6 to 178 days. Among breakthrough cases, 2%, were hospitalized and no deaths were reported. RT-PCR-CT values from samples of 127 fully vaccinated patients, median equals 22.77, were similar to those of 84 patients who were unvaccinated, not fully vaccinated, or had unknown vaccination status, median equals 21.54. Transmission mitigation measures. Transmission mitigation measures included expanded testing recommendations for people who had traveled or had close contact with a case associated with the cluster, regardless of vaccination status. There were also local recommendations for indoor mask use, again regardless of vaccination status, the deployment of state-funded mobile testing and vaccination units in the Barnstable County City, and public outreach for visitors and residents. In this tourism-centered community, the Community Tracing Collaborative conducted outreach to hospitality workers, an international workforce requiring multilingual communication. The MADPH case notifications led to additional reports of cases among residents of 22 other states who had traveled to the city in Barnstable County between July 3 and July 17, as well as reports of secondary transmission. Further analyses were underway. As of July 3, the estimated COVID-19 vaccination coverage among the eligible population in Massachusetts was 69%. Additional investigations and characterization of breakthrough infections and vaccine effectiveness were ongoing within this highly vaccinated population. Discussion. The Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2 is highly transmissible, and understanding the determinants of transmission, including human behavior and vaccine effectiveness, is essential to developing effective prevention strategies. Multiple prevention strategies are needed to reduce COVID-19 related morbidity and mortality. The conclusions of this report are subject to at least 4 limitations. The data in this report are insufficient to draw conclusions about the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines against SARS-CoV-2, including the Delta variant, during this outbreak. As population-level vaccination coverage increases, vaccinated individuals are expected to account for a larger proportion of COVID-19 cases. Asymptomatic breakthrough infections may be underrepresented due to detection bias. The demographics of the cases likely reflect those of the event attendees, as the gatherings were marketed to adult male participants. Additional studies were underway to identify further population characteristics, such as demographics and underlying health conditions, including immunocompromising conditions. MADPH, CDC, and affected jurisdictions were collaborating in this response. MADPH was conducting additional case investigations, collecting samples for genomic sequencing, and linking case data with laboratory and vaccination records. CT values obtained from qualitative RT-PCR tests for SARS-CoV-2 may provide a crude correlation with the viral load in a sample and can be influenced by factors other than viral quantity. Although the assay used in this investigation was not validated for quantitative results, there were no significant differences between the CT values of breakthrough and non-breakthrough cases. This could mean that the viral load of vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals infected with SARS-CoV-2 was similar, though microbiological studies are needed to confirm these findings. Event organizers and local health jurisdictions must continually assess the need for additional measures, including capacity limits at gatherings or postponement of events, based on current COVID-19 transmission rates, population vaccination coverage, and other factors. On July 27, the CDC issued updated recommendations that all people, including those fully vaccinated, should wear masks in indoor public settings in areas with substantial or high COVID-19 transmission. The findings of this investigation suggest that even jurisdictions without high or substantial transmission of COVID-19 might consider expanding prevention strategies, including masking in public indoor settings regardless of vaccination status, given the potential risk of infection during large public gatherings that include travelers from areas with different transmission levels. No vaccine is safe, but the fast-tracked vaccines developed in recent decades are even more harmful. The rapid swine flu vaccine caused genetic alterations. After the H1N1 swine flu pandemic of 2009, the AS03 adjuvant pandemic swine flu vaccine, a fast-tracked vaccine used in Europe but not in the United States in 2009 to 2010, was linked to childhood narcolepsy, whose cases increased significantly in several countries. Children and adolescents in Finland, the United Kingdom, and Sweden were the most affected. Other analyses detected an increase in narcolepsy cases among adults who received the vaccine. However, this connection was not as evident as in children and adolescents. A 2019 study reported finding a new relationship between pandemics-associated narcolepsy and the non-coding RNA gene GDNF, AS1, a gene that supposedly regulates the production of the glial cell line-derived neurotrophic factor, GDNF, a protein essential for neuronal survival. They also confirmed a strong link between vaccine-induced narcolepsy and a certain haplotype, which suggested that variations in genes related to the immune system and neuronal survival increase susceptibility to pandemics-induced narcolepsy in certain individuals. In addition, research has shown that the H1N1 swine flu vaccine was one of 5 inactivated vaccines that increased overall mortality, especially among girls. In 2009, that is, 11 years ago, I wrote an article about the swine flu which, in the end, turned out to contain a rather prophetic warning. The safety and effectiveness of the swine flu vaccine have not been proven, but we do know it will contain harmful additives. That is obvious to me. And in the future, whenever a new pandemic appears and the authorities recommend that you get vaccinated as soon as possible, remember this article and ask yourself whether you are really the one benefiting from that recommendation. Summary. The aspirations of transhumanists are to turn science fiction and technology into God, to create hybrid or mutant humans who would become a superior species in the universe. This movement, culture, or philosophy functions like another religion, since it makes man his own God, just as with the first lie that caused the devil to make a third of the heavenly hosts fall, and later, man on earth. Transhumanists have existed for a long time, but in the 21st century, they have gained strength and momentum. Their leaders are everywhere, and they are not ordinary people, they are influential individuals with power and money, directing international organizations and creating groups, forums, and alliances to fix the world. Their mission is to lead humanity to a state of consciousness and authority above God, making man equal to him. Although many of them are atheists, agnostics, or followers of various beliefs, they all share the same mindset, and it works as a religion in itself. If that is the case, it would be the fastest growing religion in the world, because it all begins with the modification of human DNA. The sad part is that most of its members, ordinary people, do not even know it, because the devil, in his cunning, has always used tricks, strategies, and lies to deceive, first a third of the heavenly hosts, and later mankind on earth, making them believe that they can become equal to God. The 2030 Agenda represents the global imposition of this new normality or religion, where artificial intelligence would be worshipped and free will would be abolished from the human species. In this false vaccine, and I say false because it is not a vaccine, the name is better received or accepted since we have been taught that vaccines save or prevent diseases. But what they are really injecting into the population is a generic treatment that modifies DNA to create artificial or forced antibodies so that we can respond faster to attacks from any virus, not just this coronavirus, because there are thousands of viruses circulating and millions of people dying from them. And I am not the one saying this, their own investors, scientists, and promoters say it. Regardless of the mRNA vaccine, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, Russian, Chinese, Israeli, or any other, they are all created in the same way. And for any of them to be applied massively in any country, they must be approved by the WHO, World Health Organization. The problem is that not all of us are the same, not all bodies or organisms respond or react in the same way. God was the one who created our DNA and our immune system with the ability to defend and heal itself. Creating artificial or forced antibodies is playing God, but the most dangerous part of all this is that this supposed vaccine is still under testing because its long-term effects are unknown. Although the necessary trials have been carried out and tested on thousands of people, it is only now being tested on millions worldwide. According to the official website of virus.gov, which reflects the results of existing vaccines, more than 12,000 people have already died in the United States alone, in just 6 or 7 months. And not only elderly people or those with pre-existing conditions, but also healthy people and even children. These reports exist, even if the media hides them and the population is not properly warned. This is not a story I made up or a conspiracy theory I heard or saw on YouTube, this is reflected on official public health institution websites. The saddest part of all is that there is strong pressure to force people to get vaccinated, violating international agreements and essential human rights. Some countries, states, companies, and institutions are forcing people to be vaccinated, using blackmail such as job termination, employment requirements, or unconstitutional sanctions. And little by little, people are surrendering their freedoms and free will, all under the excuse of the common good, health, control, and the fear created around this virus. Viruses, germs, and bacteria have existed in this world long before we did. God is wise, good, and His mercy endures forever. Those who trust in God, their Creator, should not live in fear or allow themselves to be manipulated or guided by the disinformation spread by the media, which responds to the same interests as those who create the problems and the solutions. These are the ones who experiment, who want to control the entire global population and turn everyone into lifetime patients, because health is a business. Do you really think the pharmaceutical industry wants sick people to get well? Think. What they want is for everyone to become patients for life, because it is an industry that generates enormous profits. The elite of economic power, bankers, businessmen, so-called philanthropists, unscrupulous scientists with dubious interests, and influential, wealthy individuals, have formed alliances with politicians worldwide, as well as with corporations, companies, laboratories, and international institutions, to control humanity. And although this may sound conspiratorial, it is a fact that cannot be denied, because these same leaders and influential figures have publicly revealed their intentions on their own official pages, forums, interviews, books, and articles. What is perverse about this is that, even though they claim it is for a noble cause, it is really about establishing a new world order, economic, political, social, and religious, in other words, a global tyranny. In summary, even if this supposed vaccine were 100% effective, which it is not, since there is no vaccine, medicine, or formula that is completely effective, if it is imposed, it cannot be something good. When the truth is censored and voices are silenced, giving credibility only to one group that serves shared interests of people who have no fear of God or genuine purpose to heal us, it's one more sign that we should not trust it. According to the Holy Scriptures, in Jeremiah 17 verse 5. Cursed is the man who trusts in man. Many of those who have been vaccinated have had no adverse reactions, most likely because they received the placebo. Many others, however, have suffered reactions, become seriously ill, and shared their experiences, because the dead cannot speak, and no one takes responsibility for them. But the alarming part is that a large percentage of vaccinated people did not get infected throughout a year and a half of the pandemic, yet they fell ill right after receiving the so-called salvation vaccine. The most pathetic part is that we, and I include myself, have been warning people about the danger of this supposed vaccine, which, to be administered, must be approved by the WHO, an organization sponsored and directed by the same people who invest in vaccines and the pharmaceutical industry. You don't even have to be a recognized scientist to understand the danger of this vaccine and what's behind the pandemic, the vaccine, its imposition, and the global health control. All it takes is common sense, reading official statistics online, watching testimonies, and reading the Bible, because none of this is new, rather, it is part of the fulfillment of end-time prophecies, foretold by the men of God and warned by God Himself. The day they force you to get vaccinated, ask only 3 questions before making your decision. Does this vaccine guarantee that I won't get sick with COVID? Answer, no. Are the long-term effects of this vaccine known? Answer, no. Will anyone take responsibility if this vaccine causes me an allergic reaction, makes me sick with something else, or causes my death? Answer, no. Conclusion, you don't need that vaccine, because the remedy could be worse than the disease, no matter how much science is behind it. Science is imperfect and limited. How to avoid contagion effectively? The best way to avoid disease is to prevent infection, not necessarily through a miracle vaccine. Wearing masks all the time, or isolating yourself out of fear. The most effective ways are as follows. Maintain personal hygiene. Wash your hands and face frequently, whenever possible, especially when you return from any place. Avoid touching your face when you are outside the home. If you must do so, carry a small bottle of sanitizing alcohol so you can disinfect your hands. Whenever you leave a public place, work, stores, supermarkets, restaurants, etc., carry a small bottle of sanitizing alcohol or hand soap to disinfect yourself. Soap is actually more effective than alcohol and doesn't irritate the skin. Clean yourself well immediately. If you use a mask indoors, wear it correctly, don't wear it just for show, because that can be worse and even more contagious. Viruses, germs, and bacteria adhere easily to masks and can end up entering your nose or eyes. Prolonged mask use is unnecessary for a virus that is already being controlled. If you are forced to wear one, remember, use a new one each day and wear it properly. But outdoors, it's better to remove it, breathe, enjoy the oxygen, sunlight, and the benefits of the nature that God created. Watch your diet. Eat healthy. Don't abuse sugar, alcohol, carbohydrates, red meat, or fried foods. These can cause heart problems without you even realizing it, damaging your organs and immune system. What we eat daily is already often unhealthy, inflated, treated, medicated, processed, and altered foods. Strengthen yourself with vitamins C, D, B, and E, and use more natural options. Don't forget to drink plenty of water daily. If this becomes a habit in your life, you will enjoy a healthier and safer life, even in the midst of an endless, manipulated, and misinformed pandemic. Manipulated data, questionable trials, and corruption in the scientific system. One of the most significant problems with modern science is that the system itself has become corrupted by corporate interests. When the companies that fund the studies are the same ones that profit from the results, truth is the first casualty. A 2015 article published in the British Medical Journal, BMJ, titled The Corruption of Science, The Decline of Academic Freedom and Integrity, by Dr. Richard Horton, editor-in-chief of The Lancet, warned. Much of the scientific literature, perhaps half, may simply be untrue. Afflicted by studies with small sample sizes, tiny effects, invalid exploratory analyses, and flagrant conflicts of interest, together with an obsession for pursuing fashionable trends of dubious importance, science has taken a turn toward darkness. Dr. Horton added. The apparent endemic misconduct in science is alarming. False discoveries are becoming the norm, and the system is failing to correct itself. Similarly, the BMJ has reported multiple instances of data manipulation, selective reporting, and pressure on scientists to produce favorable outcomes for corporate sponsors. Pfizer's manipulated trials. In November 2021, a shocking report in the British Medical Journal exposed serious flaws and irregularities in the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine trials. The whistleblower, Brooke Jackson, worked as a regional director at Ventavia Research Group, a company hired by Pfizer to test its vaccine at several sites in Texas. Jackson provided the BMJ with dozens of internal documents, photos, and audio recordings showing that the trials included falsified data, unblind participants, underqualified vaccinators, delayed follow-up on adverse events, improper storage of vaccine samples, lack of monitoring of participants after injection. Despite her repeated warnings, Pfizer ignored the problems, and the FDA never inspected the sites. Instead of investigating, Ventavia fired Jackson the very same day she reported her concerns. The BMJ confirmed that Pfizer's data irregularities directly affected the safety and reliability of the vaccine's results, but by that time, the vaccine had already been distributed worldwide under the Emergency Use Authorization, EUA. Doctors for COVID Ethics, Scientific Warnings. A group of over 160 scientists and physicians from across Europe, calling themselves Doctors for COVID Ethics, sent open letters to the European Medicines Agency, EMA, warning that mRNA vaccines posed grave risks, including blood clots, stroke, heart inflammation, and autoimmune disorders. Their letter stated, "It is clear that the approval of the experimental COVID-19 gene-based vaccines by the European Medicines Agency was premature and reckless in the extreme. The rollout of these products must be halted immediately pending further investigation." One of the signatories, Dr. Suchert Bhakti, a renowned German microbiologist, explained that mRNA technology forces the body's own cells to produce foreign proteins, which the immune system then attacks, creating autoimmune damage in blood vessels and vital organs. He warned, "This is not just about an adverse event here or there. It is a ticking time bomb of autoimmune disease and vascular inflammation." The FDA's revolving door. Another factor that compromises scientific integrity is the revolving door between regulatory agencies and the pharmaceutical industry. Top officials often leave the FDA or CDC only to take lucrative positions in the very companies they were once responsible for regulating. For example, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner, later joined Pfizer's board of directors. Dr. Stephen Hahn, who led the FDA during the early vaccine rollouts, joined the flagship pioneering firm, the same venture capital fund that created Moderna. Dr. Julie Gerberding, former CDC director, became an executive vice president at Merck. This conflict of interest has turned the FDA and CDC into extensions of the pharmaceutical industry, rather than protectors of public health. A system built on profits, not people. It is important to understand that Big Pharma operates as a for-profit industry, not a humanitarian one. Its business model relies on chronic illness, not on curing disease. As Dr. Marcia Angel, former editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, once wrote, "It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published, or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines." She added, "The pharmaceutical industry has corrupted the practice of medicine through its influence over what doctors prescribe, what patients believe, and what the public is told. What this means for the world. The combination of corruption, greed, and blind trust in technology has paved the way for mass human experimentation on an unprecedented scale. Governments, media, and global organizations, funded by the same powerful interests, are pushing humanity toward a future where biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and digital surveillance merge into what many call transhumanism, the next step in human evolution according to those who wish to play God." The COVID-19 vaccination campaign was not just a health response, it was a global test to measure compliance, fear, and the population's willingness to accept technological control over their own biology. Could the new COVID vaccine signal the beginning of transhumanism? The introduction of mRNA technology marks a crucial step toward what many have called the Great Convergence, the merging of humans and technology under a new scientific and philosophical agenda known as transhumanism. Transhumanism is a movement that seeks to enhance human beings through technology, including artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and cybernetics. Its followers believe humanity must evolve beyond its biological limits by merging the body with machines and artificial intelligence to create a better human, a so-called Homo Deus, or God-man. One of the leading advocates of this ideology is Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, WEF, who has openly stated, "The fourth industrial revolution will lead to a fusion of our physical, digital, and biological identities." Schwab's book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, describes how governments and corporations will use biotechnology and digital surveillance to reshape society, what he calls a new normal for the world. In the same book, he predicts the coming of implantable microchips, digital health passports, AI-driven governance, and nanotechnological vaccines capable of altering human biology. Digital ID and the Internet of Bodies. Alongside mRNA technology, governments and private organizations are developing systems of digital identification tied to health records and biometric data. These digital IDs are being promoted as tools for public safety, but in reality, they represent a framework for total surveillance. The World Economic Forum calls this the Internet of Bodies, a network of digitally connected humans where biological data, such as heartbeat, temperature, and even thoughts, can be transmitted to centralized databases in real time. According to the WEF's own documents, this system will enable governments and corporations to monitor, predict, and influence human behavior. The COVID-19 pandemic provided the perfect pretext to normalize these technologies. Digital vaccine passports, facial recognition software, and contact tracing apps were rolled out globally, paving the way for a future where movement, access to services, and even employment could depend on digital health status. Nanotechnology and the human body. The so-called next generation of vaccines will use nanoparticles and biosensors that can deliver drugs, monitor bodily functions, or communicate with external devices. This technology has already been in development for years under programs funded by DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and the Gates Foundation. These microscopic particles can cross the blood-brain barrier, interact with neurons, and potentially connect the human mind to cloud-based systems. In theory, this could allow real-time tracking of brain activity and emotional responses, all under the pretext of improving health or preventing disease. However, critics warn that this technology could easily be weaponized for social control, allowing unprecedented intrusion into private life, essentially turning the human being into a node of data within a global digital network. The final goal, reprogramming humanity. If mRNA technology allows scientists to instruct the body to produce specific proteins, future versions could be used to reprogram cellular behavior, modify emotions, or enhance obedience. This is not science fiction. DARPA and several biotech firms are already researching genetic behavioral modification and neural re-engineering. Such control mechanisms fit perfectly within the transhumanist vision, where human biology is no longer sacred but rather a platform to be upgraded, like software. When we combine this with AI surveillance, biometric databases, and centralized digital currencies, the result is an integrated system of technological dominance where the distinction between human, machine, and state begins to disappear. As Yuval Noah Harari, advisor to the WEF, said during a 2020 speech, "Once we have the technology to hack human beings, governments will no longer need to rely on armies or police to control people. They can do it directly by understanding what's happening inside your body and mind." A spiritual perspective. From a biblical point of view, this represents a direct rebellion against God, an attempt to replace divine creation with an artificial one made in man's image. It is the same sin described in Genesis, when humanity sought to be like God by building the Tower of Babel. This is why believers must remain alert. The enemy's strategy has always been the same: to distort, deceive, and destroy what God has made perfect. By manipulating human DNA and merging man with machine, the world system is attempting to erase the image of God in humanity. As it is written, "For you formed my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb." Psalm 139 verse 13. Summary and final reflections. The aspiration of the transhumanist movement is to turn science fiction and technology into a god, creating hybrid or mutant humans to form a supposedly superior species in the universe. This movement, culture, or philosophy operates like another religion, because it turns man into God, which was the first lie that caused the devil to deceive 1/3 of the heavenly hosts, and later, humanity on earth. Transhumanists have existed for a long time, but in the 21st century, this movement is gaining greater strength and visibility. Its leaders are everywhere, and they are not ordinary people. They are influential individuals with power and money, directing international organizations, creating groups, forums, and alliances to supposedly fix the world. Their mission is to elevate man to a state of consciousness and authority above God, making him equal to the Creator. Although many are atheists, agnostics, or followers of other beliefs, they all share the same mindset, functioning as yet another global religion. If that is the case, it would be the fastest growing religion in the world, because it all begins with the modification of human DNA. The sad reality is that most of its members, ordinary people, don't even know it. In his cunning, the devil has always used strategies and lies to deceive, first the third of the heavenly host and then mankind on earth, making them believe they can become equal to God. The same spirit of rebellion that led to Lucifer's fall is behind this modern obsession with controlling life, nature, and creation itself. Through technology, genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence, and synthetic biology, humanity is repeating the same ancient error, trying to replace God. But God's word warns us clearly that such arrogance will not go unpunished. As it is written, "For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." Matthew 23 verse 12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Proverbs 14 verse 12. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Galatians 6 verse 7. Final word. The true vaccine against fear, deception, and evil is not made in laboratories, it comes through faith in God and the power of the Holy Spirit. No genetic modification or artificial enhancement can ever compare to the divine perfection with which we were created. Humanity's only salvation and protection come from trusting the Creator, not from technology, governments, or pharmaceutical corporations. Let us therefore seek wisdom, discernment, and faith. Let us remember that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and that no man, government, or institution has the right to alter what God made in His image. The real transformation humanity needs is spiritual, not genetic. Only through repentance, love, and obedience to God can we achieve true healing, of both the body and the soul. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Romans 12 verse 2. End of the book. Book created by Baute Production in Tampa, Florida, United States of America. Phone, 813-693-8879. Biography and works of Milco Baute. Milco Baute Lopez, a talented Cuban writer, editor, and educator, has woven a fascinating career over the decades. His pen, filled with passion and creativity, has been a beacon of knowledge and artistic expression since 1992, when he began enlightening the world with his insightful articles. The most significant chapter of his life was written on December 10, 1995, when Milco crossed borders and oceans to settle in the United States. This land of opportunity became his new home, and in 2001. With a deep sense of belonging, he embraced U.S. citizenship, merging his Cuban roots with his love for cultural diversity. The pursuit of knowledge and wisdom has always been a constant in Milco's life. This passionate self-learner, eager to nourish his intellect, embarked on a remarkable academic journey. He studied philosophy through an online course offered by the University of Edinburgh in Scotland and, in 2016, successfully completed his academic journey, becoming a graduate of that venerable institution. Milco Baute is not only an accomplished writer but also a prolific author. From 2008 to the present, he has given life to more than 100 books, showcasing his literary talent in both English and Spanish. In addition to his personal works, Milco plays a key role in the publishing industry as an editor, proofreader, and distributor, collaborating with other authors to bring their stories to the world.